Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg and it's the second day of October 2024 and I'm going to jump right into our show. We're starting out with Liberty Essentials with Bill Mohr, Ralph the IT guy, and Karen the Riveter. And after that, we're going to go to a gentleman that I have tremendous respect for. His name is Chris Kaijala. Chris Kaijala was the one that did all the data analyzing. He's a data analyst. Behind what happened with GBI Strategies. And there's more information that's coming out on this. And I think that we really need to take a look at this because this is critically important for us to understand because there's more to this than what was even put out forward before. So good morning, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Good
morning.
I wanted to bring something up because I didn't sleep well last night because I'm still feeling kind of under the weather here a little bit. But the internet was literally down during the night, and I mean down a lot. I was checking the down detector. I was checking all the social media. Telegram went offline for a little while. X was offline. The internet was down. It was down. It wasn't just here, with our router or anything like that. It was, or our Wi-Fi. It was literally down last night, and it was down for a while. And I sat there. I snapped a picture of the area that was affected for Verizon, but it wasn't just Verizon. When you go and you look at all the carriers, it is there's usually a correlation there, and there was a huge correlation of the internet, of Verizon, of all of the carriers were pretty well down in the middle of the night. So and Twitter or X was down. And this morning I'm looking at the screen here, and we're not live on X right now, and I'm not sure why. So kind of and I set it up to go to X like I do every single morning. So there you go. I think that with this strike and everything else, we're going to have to keep our eyes open. And before we jump into anything, everybody needs to truly, my friend that I interviewed on Monday, who's down there, sent me something this morning, and people are saying they will never be the same again because there's bodies laying everywhere. And so the enormity of what happened down there in North Carolina cannot be stressed a lot, that we have a lot of people down there that are missing. The marshals that my friend talked to were estimating 11,000. Okay, we need to think about this, that they're thinking it's going to be north of 11,000 people down there. And we don't know, we won't know until we get the final count. But the point being is that not only are there 11,000, or even if there was 1,000, which they're telling us, which we know we can't ever believe their count. So I would rather listen to somebody that is on the ground talking about that and say, this is what they said. I don't know. We can't confirm until we get into this a little further. But just to be prepared for what is going to come out of this. And now we've got, I think, two or three more hurricanes coming or originating from the same spot in the Gulf, going up, and we don't know where they're going to steer it because they're steering these things. And I posted a video yesterday about weather manipulation and exactly how they do that. So I think that we really have to be aware of the fact that weather modification is real. Whoever did it is guilty of the murder of all of these people, bringing the mountains down on them and wiping away the towns. And maybe we need to broaden the way we look at the world just a little bit, because if you don't know somebody who has classically been called a conspiracy theorist, there probably should be a phone a friend right now to try to tell you what exactly is going on. So with that said, please keep everyone in your prayers down there. One of the things, I'll post it later. I will post the writing that I got this morning about what the woman said. She said people are just staring off in the distance in a state of absolute shock because of the mortality they're seeing down there.
Yeah, maybe this is nothing new that we've been through. We've been through numerous situations identical to this over the last 2 decades, right? And I mean, we'll go here right now. One of the things that I see more often than not, and it hurts to have to say it, but the majority of people that I see anytime something like this goes down, even if it's close to them. A lot of it is just let's pray for these people, right? Everybody prays. Everybody sits in the comfort of their little homes on their couches and prays. How many people are capable and are willing to actually go do something? Before anybody jumps the gun, there are people out there probably thinking, well, Bill, what are you going to do? We're building a team to go down there at the beginning of November. The people that we're working with, they actually have the majority of October set for the amount of people going down, and we're going to take a team down there in November, mainly to help with cleanup, help support families. That is what it is to be an American. That is what it is to be a Christian. When we see somebody hurting on the side of the road, right? Are we going to be one of those Levites that just walk past and just pray for them, hope that somebody else will take care of them? Or are we going to be one of the outcasts, one of the Samaritans that will actually pick them up and say, hey, what do you need? I'm here for you. Let's get this done. That is a lot of what is failing, not only as Americans, but in the churches, as individuals, in conservative groups. It is a whole lot of let's pray for these people, but oh yeah, I can't go down there. I got to get to work, or I've got kids at home. I can't do anything about it. Well, let me tell you something. I bring my kids to these kind of places because they have to see what's going on. My children are not going to live in ignorance until they're adults and then have to try to figure it out like a lot of us had to do. They're learning as we go. They're doing the things that we do. Donna and Ralph can attest to this. When we have meetings across the state, a lot of times my kids are with me because they have to understand what it's going to be like when they grow up. And they're going to have to understand the fight. If it's not taken care of at the end of my life, they're going to have to understand the fight that they're going to have to be in and have the entire backstory and history to be able to put it together and make the right decision. We cannot leave our posterity out with the intent of just sitting back and praying for these people. We have to be doers of the word, not just hearers. Sorry, that's my little rant this morning.
No, I believe that. And that really leads into something really important, because I had something that happened this week, and I'm not going to elaborate on it at this time. But we were talking this morning, and I would wager to say that I'm probably spent as much or more than any single candidate ever has themselves, besides Donald Trump, in a political election. We lost terribly. And not only did we lose money from a family that is not billionaires, that we also were attacked. Our businesses were attacked terribly. And I mean, the cost that we put into this was amazing. And it was amazing to see how few people never even gave it a thought to step up and actually do anything to help of any material way. I mean, they would show up for things, and that was great. But you've got to be willing to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to take the lead, because I didn't have all the dark money behind me, or the PAC money, or the support of a political party. It was basically the single effort of one person with a few volunteers who were absolutely wonderful. I'm not going to take that away from anybody, but it was to go against a beast system that we have going on, and it's a beast. It is. They have unlimited money. And I'm going to tell you something else that's going to be kind of shocking, I think, to a lot of people. I have a very, very good friend, very, very good friend, who actually worked for the State Department in the past. Also, this person was terribly damaged because he wouldn't capitulate, and has been kind of coaching me a little bit on what I'm seeing. We had a conversation yesterday, and he said, this is the reality of it. He said, the underpinning of this structure, he said, now the lower level Masons have no idea what's going on. No idea. He said, they raise money for fun things, blah, blah, blah. And I've said for a long time that the lower level of the Masons are a vetting. It's a vetting form, just like the political parties and these grassroots groups. Most of them, they're vetting you to see how compliant, stupid, manipulatable you are. Okay. and not all of them. I'm not going to say all of them. It's not a blanket statement, but most of them have been infiltrated. I could kick out about a dozen names here that would probably shock a lot of people, but they're all connected. When you start seeing how these networks run, they're all connected. They're getting orders from someone, and they're all working together. Well, the Masons are the same way. And once you get up to the 33rd degree Mason, those people literally have to sell their soul to the devil. And there are more levels above that, which is really, really concerning. And this person said to me, they said, if you ever see an apple, they said they can get into your house, they can do whatever they want. They know how to sneak around, spook around, get into anything, because they're in the network that controls everything. And I mean everything. He said they can get into your house. He said if you ever see an apple with a bite out of it in your refrigerator, they said that's one of the signs that they're tapping you to say that they want you, and that they're interested in you or something like that. And they'll promise you all the money in the world, all the power in the world. You have unlimited money, unlimited power if you join them. And
nothing says I want you more than an apple in your fridge with a bite out of it.
Well, think about
you didn't do. I'm sorry, that's just creepy.
It's really creepy. I mean, think about this. And I think it's unfortunate, but we probably should go through some of this, because my friend that's down in North Carolina, she actually started going to the Masonic meetings, the Eastern Star meetings and such, and flat out said it's a pentagram on the floor, and you have to go to all of these stations, the Grand Master and such. I actually published a Masonic ceremony. I don't know, it was a year and a half ago on my Telegram channel, and the little secret handshakes that they do online and such. And as soon as Kennedy, President Kennedy, as soon as he said something about secret societies, he was done 3 days later, and they took him out at that moment in time. This stuff is for real. There is a network behind the scenes. The ones that are involved there, you can call them whatever you want, but the underpinnings of all of these of Hollywood, of the global crime syndicate that I call it, I'm going to tell you what, you're going to be able to trace it back to Freemasonry, and the fact that these people have sold their souls, they're Satan worshipers.
There's a couple of people that I know that I definitely consider to be good people, that I know to be Masons, and one of them tried to convince me one time that there are no levels of Freemasonry above the third level, and that's as high as it goes, and anything else past that is a myth. Well, that, in my opinion, is probably one of the most glowing recommendations of his character I can think of, because it means that he refused to do any of the stuff that would put him at a higher level or give him any of that access.
He's not getting any apples, in other words.
Well, yeah. And I want you to think about this. There's a lot of people that have walked away from the Freemasons, and they make a blood oath. They absolutely make a blood oath. And why do you think they went after President Trump? I believe he's a Mason, and I believe he walked away. And you walk away from that, and you are going to absolutely be attacked in a vicious way. And if they will absolutely, this is organized crime, guys. They'll go after them and they'll take them out. And that's the truth. I mean, and there are levels above the 33rd degree Mason level. And you know what? And I'm gonna tell you what. I actually have a little bit of personal knowledge on this. Not that I was involved, but a lot of the members of my family were. And that's why they didn't like me, because I wouldn't take part in any of this nonsense. It never made sense to me. It was like, thank God I had a really good dad. My dad was a very godly man. And, he read his Bible. He read it, and I don't mean just read it. He studied that Bible hours every single day. he studied anything. When he got saved, his salvation was one of the biggest testimonies to Christ. He turned his life over to Christ, and he was a new creation. It was amazing. It was totally amazing. But he was never involved in the Masons, but he knew the family members that were involved in the Masons. And he always kind of made fun of them, because my dad was, he never minced words. He said what he wanted to say. But the mob, the mafia, they're all it's all involved in it. And I can tell you exactly how that works because of the connections in the people that came before me.
And one thing you have to look at, because this is without stating this, people will blindly believe it, but our posterity is being indoctrinated to think that Masons and Freemasonry have always been this way, right? And one thing you posted just a day or two ago, you posted again the Albert Pike, the Scottish Rite Mason, and he was a 33rd degree Mason. He had some very interesting things to say. Very, very telling of what's going on, nonetheless. But if you go back to the founding of America, Masons were no more than literal masonry, right? They were bricklayers, and Freemasons were no more than those who would travel across the continent to lay brick, right? That was by definition, that was their trade, that was what they do, and their lodges were simply no more than gathering spots where they would bring in local preachers to hear the word of God. I mean, you can go back in history and look this up, right? It's evident. And there was, over the past couple of years, there's been a huge picture rotating, or not rotating or cycling, but a huge picture going around that would show George Washington in Masonic garb, saying that he was part of the Freemasonry as it was known today. And that is completely false, because George Washington, in a letter to a man somewhere over in England that had asked him about that, he was concerned about what was going on. And there were rumors in the 1760s to 1780s of George Washington being part of that. And he himself said that he has never led a lodge and has never attended a lodge more than I think he said one or two or three times in 30 years, right? Our posterity is being indoctrinated to say that all of these founders, our framers, were no more than occultists, part of the group that has now become what the Masons and Freemasonry are. And that's not the way it was. It was not that until over 100 years later is when it turned into as we see it today.
Well, this is interesting because, you can let's talk about the infiltration. Now, going back to those books, the biblical blueprint, we talked about using religion, the Marxists using religion, and how the Marxists, which they're flat out Satanists, they are Satanists, the doctrine that the people at the top, and you can't say all the way down. It's just like when we say the political parties. There's a lot of really good Republicans out there that think they're doing the right thing. They're in it. Their motivation is right. They want to help. They want the nation back. We're all in that position who actually care about this nation. We don't have all the answers, but we're in there hacking away at the evil that we see around us in the ways that God calls us to do.
And we've talked about that too for the cancer industry, that, it is completely screwed up as an industry, but there are good people in it, trying to make a difference, trying to, nurses caring for people and researchers trying to find stuff, but it's an industry. And as a whole, the organism itself is cancerous.
Let's go back to this biblical blueprint. I just want to read you something. In 1965, there was a revolt by communist forces in Indonesia against the tottering socialist government of President Sukarno. I don't know how to say it. This revolt failed. In the wave of Muslim wrath that followed, at least 200,000 communists and their suspected supporters were slaughtered. It may be as many as 1 million. The communists learned an important lesson. It is risky to try to impose an illegal atheist religion on deeply religious people. They adopted a new strategy, a far more open, less clandestine cooperation between communism and religion. From 1965 on, the communists began to promote Marxist Christian dialogue. Those were one-sided affairs. The communists conceded nothing, and the people who dealt with them, humanists who called themselves Christians, conceded everything. The most widely known communist in this dialogue was French scholar Roger Guérini, who, when he opened publicly the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, he was expelled from the French Communist Party. So much for dialogue and the mutual sharing of views. Conservative Christian journalist and historian Otto Scott has commented on the importance of, here, let me put this up a minute. Sorry, I should have just put this up before, so you can see what I'm reading here. Not just coming out of my head. Conservative Christian journalist and historian Otto Scott has commented on the importance of the Indonesian slaughter for the international communist strategy. Turning towards Central and South America, they realized that a revolution could not achieve a success in those regions unless it included religious elements. Consequently, their Hispanic campaign moved beyond the intellectuals, a corporate element available to any purchaser at the time, into a traditional Roman Catholic circles. Liberation theory was their vehicle, the same arguments that smoothed into mainline religious circles in the United States.
That's exactly how they do it. I mean, we said it before. What is rat poison made out of? 99.9% food and 0.1% poison, right? They know that the people will not accept their own destruction. However, if you give them just a little bit, if you take just a little bit at a time, piece by piece, they will accept it, because for the most part, what was being done in the mid 1900s looked good to the people, right? Who didn't want prosperity? Who didn't want the so-called American dream, which really ticks me off when people misuse that? Who didn't want their own families, their own lands? Who didn't want a little bit of welfare? And more or less, who didn't want the government to take care of the poor? Right? So they didn't have to do it. They knew it was a good thing, but the 0.1% poison was that they allowed the government to usurp that authority and do it for them, for what they were called to do by their creator. So that, you look at anything and you can see that being done, right? The Republican Party has been doing it forever. The Democrat Party has been doing it forever, right? And I will be the one to stand here and say the Democrat Party, in its origination, right, in the 1780s, 1790s, when they all started to bind together, they were doing what was right, constitutionally and by law. I will also say the Republican Party, in its foundation in the 1860s and through their first and second election cycle, to the election of President Lincoln, their sole foundation, for the most part, was correct. However, they started with the idea of usurping states' authority. Right? That was the very beginning of the Republican Party. And what do we have now? We have the Communist Party across the U.S. We got socialist parties. We have parties that blatantly admit to violating the law, that blatantly admit to wanting to overthrow the republic. They're treasonous at their core because they want the destruction of America. Yet they're tolerated to exist somehow based on what? Maybe freedom of speech, I guess, is what they would probably use there, right? We don't have the freedom of speech to go out and publicly declare the destruction of the country that we owe allegiance to. Right? Yet they continue to be tolerated on all fronts. It's something that, for the life of me, I cannot understand that. I'll tell you a story one time, just a little background on my family history. My grandfather grew up in your neck of the woods, Donna, actually out there near 84th and Division. So he was in the Byron Center area. But they all grew up in that area. And there was one time where he was at a a grocery store or something that probably doesn't exist anymore. And in the parking lot, a guy had walked up to him and handed him a flyer. And on the flyer, it was for the Communist Party of the United States, right? And this guy started his little spiel. That lasted about 3 seconds. And my grandfather had his hand around his throat, threatening his life if he utters one more word, right? We didn't tolerate it then. What changed? What changed was the hearts and the minds of the people. As we progress farther and farther away from the truth and the law, everything becomes relative to what an individual thinks, what their ideology is. That's the problem, is we have taught generations now to believe what you think is correct must be correct, and that nobody can tell you otherwise, which allows the floodgates to open to any type of imaginable transgression of the law that you can possibly think of. And here we are, and now there's so much of it that you can't just tackle it on a one-on-one basis, which is why I make the stand. If we're going to do something, it has to be all for the Constitution and the law, or I don't want a part of it. I'm not willing to progress back to right, because you cannot progress back to the right as fast as they're progressing to the left.
You're absolutely right on that. And then multiply that by the evil that's here, and look at the hearts of men. Everybody wants to sit there and complain and bitch about the government, but you know what? I think you just need to look around you and see what the population. We got a representative government. When you look at how few people are willing to step forward and do anything unless they're paid for. Everybody's got to get paid for every little single thing that they do, or they go and they play. Well, you know what? And I shouldn't say everybody. There's a lot of good people out there, but you know what I mean? If you look around you, I mean, be real honest with yourselves. Look around you at the people around you, and the majority of people that you'll see, unless they're getting paid for something, they want to play. They have no interest in helping, and you might get an answer shot at you like I don't work for this or something. I actually had somebody say that to me, and it's like, well, I don't freaking work for it either. This is my duty to try to help save this nation. I'm not doing this for fun. I mean, there's a lot of things I could have done differently than what I've done here. It's my time, my fortune, and my sacred honor. You have to be able to put that into our time and treasure. What is it? Treasure, time, treasure, sacred honor. And you have to be able to pledge what you have. And when this nation is in trouble, this is when we step up, and it's serious. It's like if we don't step up now, and I mean every single one of us, to look around and say, what can I do? The ship's sinking, and everybody better be bailing water, or it's going down. And you know what? We can look at the few that are getting tapped out, because of just continually working. You can't put this entire country on the back of a few people who are willing to stand for it, and nobody back them, and nobody be willing to stand with them, and just go along, get along. Let's just jump on the political parties and go to the coffee. Let's go get coffee and free cookies, and such. And then because of what happened this week of not being willing to help when help really needed to happen, but being able to be paid for it, I'm really shocked right now. I really am. I kind of had some time to process this, and going through all of these groups that are out there, because I've gone to a lot of them, and there needs to be a baseline evaluation of the groups that you are involved in, that we are all involved in, a baseline assessment. If they do not get anything done that's work, that they're not working on something when you get to that meeting, not just leave and feel good about it, but if they're not working on something and putting people into a process to work with that, so you get everybody working together and pulling together, so you can splinter off smaller groups to be able to tackle other things once they get accomplished at the tasks and educated in what really needs to be done. It'll continue to spread, right? if there's no work being done, and that's not fundraiser to fundraiser to fundraiser, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what kind of actual work is being done for the country. When you look at what the political parties by and large do, they're fighting full time about who to sit there and worship. It's an idolatrous situation. Who is the new Tiger Beat superstar that they can go and flirt with? And quite honestly, it was horrible when Soldano and Kelly were there. It was almost embarrassing to me. I felt like I was embarrassed for these people, because the amount of women that were around them, fawning over them like a bunch of 16-year-olds, flirting with them, was so shocking to me that I was just like, I would just sit there and go, you really got to be kidding me. And nobody's talking about anything real. It's just this, flirtatious thing. And then, had the same thing with Dixon. I had one guy come up to me and say, I won't even be near her because she was hanging all over me at an event. And I got to tell you, ladies out there, you're making fools out of yourself in this. It's just like the women that were out there wearing the pussy hats in the Me Too thing. You're embarrassing yourselves in ways that this is one of those things that you go back and look at yourself in a bad haircut after about 30 years. You're going to look back at this time and be so embarrassed on what was going on and what absolute depths of depravity and craziness it was going on here publicly in the political realm. It is, if it weren't so absolutely tragic and sad, it would be like watching an Austin Powers movie. Stupid.
One of the things I've noticed is that, and it was a hard lesson for me, you've got to strengthen your faith and keep it up. And one reason why is I've seen a number of people who started out, man, they were willing to put work in, willing to take time in their personal resources to do things that they felt were the right thing to do and were going to make a difference. And good people, I would say. But at some point, something happened that changed this. The attitude shifted. The approach to other people shifted. The way they get along or don't, how they manage relationships, the people that work around them in the same fashion suddenly become enemy number one. And I think one of the things that I notice is happening is the personal ego is the way that the devil creeps in. So this is something I've learned about myself. I have an ego. I tend to be humble sometimes, but at other times, in other ways, I've got a strong ego. And that awareness helps me keep that in check too. And occasionally other people do that for me. But that's a good thing, because if you don't have that personal awareness and you don't have a buddy who can check you if it gets out of hand, that pride, or even if it's not pride, but it's ego, can be the doorway for that evil to creep into your heart. Gave them over to a debaser mind is in the scripture, a reprobate mind. And I've seen that happen to people that were all for doing the right thing, but then ego mind versus heart mind took over. And suddenly they're not only useless, they're actually working in the wrong direction. And you've got to watch out for the people around you. You've got to remove them from you when they make that switch. Call them out on it. And if they can't see it, and if they don't agree with it, you better separate yourself from them, because they'll pull you down with you. They will drag you down. Donna, you understand this. They will cause you physical ailments. They will sap your energy from you. It's like a disease almost. It's like a cancer with the circle of influence around you. So surround yourself with faithful people who stay that way, but watch that they are the type to make a difference in a positive way and are constantly looking at things through a heart of love, a compassion, a sympathy for others, rather than what's in it for me, how can I shine. I'm really grateful, now that I think of it, for keeping my real name and my real face out of the public eye, because that, or profiting off of Karen the Riveter, was never my intention, and I've been consistent with that. I can't be accused of trying to gain personally, and that's another thing that you'll see with some of these people, where you discover that they're into something more than just the satisfaction of knowing they're doing the right thing or helping other people. I imagine that this team that Bill's got, talking about going to North Carolina, there's a self-satisfaction that I'm going to help the Lord's people by being there for them when they need it. And this has been a little hard time for me because I've never talked about it publicly. I'm going to say it now. I'm formally search and rescue. That's one of the avenues in my life that I have training in. I had years of experience in. That's where some of the dog stuff comes from, because I have a knowledge of that. And it's hard not to go down and do my thing there, I have some training for that, but not for the level that they're doing. I'm not connected to a team. I haven't kept my training or my fitness level up. I don't have the resources I used to have. And it's kind of hard to sit back and say, oh, there's a part of me that could help in that way, but I can't do what I used to have the training to do. But I see the lack of that training has helped me see what's not happening there that should be happening there, based on the little that's coming out. And that's really frustrating too. I'm taking it off in another direction, so I'll yield.
Well, you're right in that. And the reason why a lot of people you see go astray is because they don't have somebody there faithful enough, as Paul wrote to Timothy, to reprove, rebuke, and exhort them. Right? That is the call for the fellowship of the people of God. That and for the most part, that is being left off. A lot of people stand back, watch somebody walk through their own destruction, and say, "Oh, back to this. Oh, I'll pray for you. I'll keep praying for you." But yet don't do anything about it. They don't pick up the torch and actually present the case, call it out for what it is, and help them out of it, as James 2 says. Faith without works is dead, right? If you think that you're a religious person, you have a lot of faith, but yet when you see something happen and you know that there is something good you ought to do about it, whether or not you're going to be hurt publicly is irrelevant. But if you know that there's something good that you ought to do about it and you don't do it, to you it's a sin, right? That goes for everybody. If you don't show that which is good and instead sit back and just offer a prayer for somebody in need when you have the ability to help, you might want to examine yourself again. Back to what you were saying about people that get elevated, whether elevated in political status or whatever, and then they seem to turn, right? They play Judas to the people. They're in the crowd, they're in the mix, they hear it, they say it, they talk about it, everything's right, and then when they get to a certain level, they turn and become somebody else. I will guarantee that the majority of that, if they don't have enough character not to be bought off, I believe the majority of what's happening, especially in the political realm that we see, is that somewhere in their lives, they have some hidden sin that they cannot bring out to the public. And the powers that are tolerated in government still, they know of that, or they find it out, and they use it as blackmail against the individual to say, you better play ball, or we're going to bring this out in public. Donna, you can attest to this because you've seen people do it, and you've seen people try to attack you in the same manner. And they're not strong enough to bring it out in the light themselves and repent of it and let the people know, hey, I was into this, I was wrong. This is going to stop right here and right now. But they continue to keep it hidden, and then they have to pay off people to keep it hidden from the public eye.
Ego mind.
That's a lot of what's going on. And when you see people turn like that fast, you know there is something either about them or something that they're doing that is absolutely wrong, and they have to hide it from you, which makes you on the enemy list because you see it and they know you see it. But they cannot let you know, otherwise you're going to bring it to the light, right? That's the Christian military here, guys, right? They are afraid that we will find out and start doing the right thing. That's all it's going to take. But we have to be willing to actually have that voice and to point the finger back and say that is wrong, and we're not going to stand for it, right? I've got the same situation going. Again, Donna, you'll understand this. This is something that's going on. It's been going on for a long time. It's a family situation that I've been dealing with. But I have been one of the few for years pointing the finger and saying, I might not know all the facts, but what you're telling me is absolutely wrong. The way you're thinking about this is absolutely wrong. And I do it out of love, and I'm not doing this to boast about myself at all, right? There's people that know more and are a lot stronger than I. But I know enough that when I see it, it has to be called out. It has to be dealt with. And if you're not going to deal with it and turn from it, then I'm not going to play your game anymore. You can go get and be given up to all your vile desires if you wish to throw off your creator. I'm not going to stand in the way of that. I'm not going to be the one willfully struck by lightning, right? Metaphorically. But I'm not going to sit there and play your game and pretend with you that it's okay. Because if I do, I am an accomplice to your destruction. Yep. Just like God told Ezekiel, if you warn the righteous and he turned, right? But if you fail to warn the righteous and he die in his sins, his blood is on your hands, he said. Is that not the cause? And I'm not talking just in the church. I'm talking politically, personally, in family lives, and fellowship circles, and political parties, everything. If we see it, you have to say it. Donna, you say this all the time. See something, say something, right? That applies to every aspect of life. We cannot continue to allow these blatant transgressions, whether it be God's moral law, his statutes, American law, the Constitution. We cannot continue to allow these blatant transgressions and think that somehow 4 years from now, we'll just do it again and we'll just vote for the right guy and it'll take care of it all. It ain't going to happen, right? It is up to each one of us. You get enough people to stand up there and say, we're not tolerating it anymore. And we call for your removal now, not your resignation. You're going to be removed and you're going to be prosecuted as our Constitution says. That will put up the red flag to anybody who dare think they can get away with it next time. But because that is not being done, the very next set of people step in and they can do the same things because they know there's no consequence for it. Right? It is justice that guards our liberty, stated on our Supreme Court building. And
what a sad commentary on human beings right there, because if we were doing the right thing, we wouldn't have to have that stick held over our heads to keep us doing the right thing. You would do it because it's in your heart. And that is why, this is the core of the problem. If you do the right thing all the time, and I'm not going to say I've always been perfect, but I remember coming to a point in my life where I was just done with it. And I mean, you know what I mean? It's like when we're younger, we're a work in progress, right? And we were all born in sin, and we learn how to walk forward in the closer we are with God. You walk away from things, and you realize, hopefully, he's as the perfecter of our faith. he's perfecting us, or he's teaching us, and all of that stuff is falling away. That's what should be happening. Every day, we should strive to be better, to take all of those qualities that we love in God, that we want God to be like, and when we know that he's like, that we should want those characteristics in ourselves. That's not money. That's not success. That doesn't have anything to do with this world whatsoever. It's all of those wonderful things that when you look at somebody who has valor or honor, or they're trustworthy, and think about this. How many people do you know that are trustworthy? And I'm not even going to put a qualifier on that, but I could say, no matter what, that they would be trustworthy. And I remember, my mom said this, and I'm bringing my dad back again. My dad was an amazing individual, and there were people around that if he went and there was one guy that likes to sell, and as he got older, he sold like I don't know, some sort of precious stones and such, jewels and diamonds and that sort of thing. He would give my dad whatever he wanted to take to look at. Dad walk out the door, and he stated flat out, he said, I know I can give anything to that guy, and there's no way it's going to come back in any other way than how I handed it to him. How many people can say that? Look at these people down on the part of the looting that's going on down in this area where they're slashing tires that are bringing supplies down there. My friend Cindy said they're shooting each other over gas and water in areas, and taking advantage of people in a bad situation. Look at the dark hearts of people that take advantage of people instead of stepping in and doing the right thing and having that characteristic. Well, the only way you're going to get that, or any of us are going to get that, I'm going to say not you, but all of us are going to get that, is by walking with God, because he's the only one that can keep us from that carnal way of approaching life. It's it. It's by the blood, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and walking with him every single day. If we don't do that, we're going to fall into traps. And I can tell you in my own life, I can tell you exactly how it works for me. It works for me the same way every single time, is that when I don't spend time with God, when I don't spend time in the scripture, when I don't spend time praying and such, I start getting more angry about the world. That's what happens every time. And so the last few days, I can tell you what, it's like I've been so stinking annoyed and angry with the absolute failures around me that it's just like I'm just like ready to get on my little white pony with the swords flying and let people have it, right? Well, that's a failing of my own, because it's and last night I started praying. I'm like, all right, I screwed up here. Help me to get out of this bad attitude that I have right now, because I'm so tired of the lying, the cheating, and the stealing and all that going on. And you know what God said to me after I started praying? This is my battle.
Amen.
And it's, I immediately I started being able to sit back and not feel overwhelmed with having to fight or get rid of all this stuff, and realizing he's got all this stuff here for a reason. He allowed that hurricane to happen, and what happened in North Carolina, we don't know exactly why, but he is allowing this stuff to go on, and will take every bad thing that happens to any and every one of us and turn it into something beautiful. Like Ralph and I said, getting diagnosed with cancer, I'm going to tell you what, it was a blessing. And both of us would probably say that.
Yeah. And something too that this brings to mind of the, nobody's perfect and everybody has to have a chance to learn and grow and all of that. It brings to mind, the parable of the prodigal son, in that this is part of the reason why so many of these people are so effectively blackmailed, is because people forget the lesson of that parable. And with we need to celebrate when people are able to actually denounce their failings and grow and return to what is righteous. And that parable too, a lot of Jesus's parables were actually existing parables that he would tell the same parable and then change the ending to teach a lesson. And the prodigal son was one of those parables that the original ending of that was that the father continued to denounce the one son for his misdeeds, and it was all about the punishment for going astray and never being forgiven for that and all of that, and then Jesus came along, changed the ending of it, said no, people need to be able to return to what is righteous. And actually the same was true of the story of the Good Samaritan. That one was also the original ending of that one was about how the people that walked around or over him were in the right because they were prioritizing the do not touch a dead or mostly dead body commandment above helping him. And once again, Jesus came in, changed the ending, and he used a Samaritan, and the Samaritans were kind of like a break-off group of Judaism. So
considered half-breeds.
Yeah, well, it's a separate religion too, and the Samaritan religion still exists. It is, to a certain extent, it's a little bit similar to the Ethiopian church in that they feel that they have an older and more correct version of the Bible than what survived through the tellings of mainstream Judaism. But as a result, the Samaritans were basically religiously practicing heretics as far as the Jews were concerned at the time. And so Jesus came in, changed the ending of that parable to say, this sect, basically it was the religious people that Jesus spoke out about a lot, returning to kind of how we were talking earlier about how the communists tried to co-opt religion, and corrupt religion. And you had the same kind of thing there, where Jesus was talking a lot against the religious people at the time. And once again, go back to the source documents, go back to the Bible.
Something that's a good point. And on our checking our attitudes, how many times have all of us, and I'm just going to say all of us, thought when we watch somebody get what they deserve, what is our attitude at that point in time? It should be sad.
Yeah.
Because and no one should ever have any joy or favor. And honestly, I've heard that a lot lately too. It's like, well, they got what they deserved. They chose the shot. We're purebloods and they chose the shot. I find that to be absolutely distasteful, despicable, and
Yep.
It is really, really sad to hear that said. It's like saying, I'm better than them. I had all the knowledge. I did everything right. I. Or,
did you tell them?
Well, and even if they did tell them and they did the wrong thing, who gets happiness out of seeing somebody else suffer just because they didn't agree with you? Or they didn't do exactly what you thought needed to be done? Like who died made you God? You know what I mean? It's like there's it's a tragedy when somebody goes wrong. You remember the Lone Ranger, the old Lone Ranger TV show and movies or whatever, the TV show and such.
Still watch them, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when somebody was bad or they went bad, nobody was like, that SOB deserved what he got, blah, blah, blah. And they had a party afterwards and they celebrated. Nobody did that. They hung their heads in sadness because one of their people they knew, their family members, the people in their neighborhood, in the community, or just a random bad guy failed so spectacularly, and they were sad about it. They didn't gloat over it. And now it's like, you look around and it's like, I got all the answers. That person didn't agree with me, didn't jump into my little party of setting up a political, hero or popularity contest. So they got what they deserved. It's like, you know what? You can call stupid out all you want, and you can tell people what they're doing wrong, but these are human beings we're talking about there.
Yeah,
I want to bring this forward. I probably can start posting a little bit. I've got some things on my channel about people in Lebanon and Palestine cheering with all the rockets coming down in Israel. And there's a lot of people out there that I personally know that absolutely hate, can't stand Israel. Okay? I'm not going to say it's about the Jewish people, but it's about the country or the overlords, as it were, of Israel, and the political power. Same thing with China and such. Are we setting ourselves up to be, to be happy about this? What about the stuff that went on in let's go back during the wars, the Gulf Wars. And yay, we've got our sports team out there killing each other. Think about this. Who is the only president that kept us out of wars? That would be President Trump. And the first day that, in recent history, the first day, inauguration day, fake inauguration day, because you guys all know I don't believe in this stuff, he literally bombed Syria. And right now, we got rockets falling on Israel, and they're trying to suck us in to their emotional wars here of who are we going to back and who are we going to hate. You know what? The only thing I'm going to back right now is finding the quickest way to peace and get these morons that are running the countries, who are the real criminals, out of the way so that the people can live in peace and freedom. And as our brothers and sisters, no matter what country they're in. Now, I'm not saying this, and this is why, like, holding it to a standard of the law is so important.
Yes.
Because the law dictates whether somebody is a criminal or not.
Yes.
If we have a standard. I don't care if they're an illegal alien or not. If they are, they broke the law. It says it right there. They came in illegally, bam, discussion over. It makes it so easy that way. But making excuses for people, well, they had a bad childhood. We don't really, we got to take, no, they broke the law. And I don't care why they broke the law. I don't care if they had a bad childhood. I don't care if they had, bad coffee in the morning, or they were hyped up on drugs, like that's some sort of a weird excuse. I don't care. If they broke the law, they broke the law. Now, we've got to realize, too, that they've rewritten the laws to be absolutely illegal right now. But they broke the law. They broke the law.
May I? Are you guys hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I couldn't tell because I'm just trying to politely say may I. I think
5 minutes, Karen, because Chris is backstage here. So
okay, yeah, I can be quick. Well, sometimes I can be quick. I think it boils down to seeing other people as children of God, because your enemy is a child of God too. I think Ralph told a story about that a long time ago. Somebody told a story about how people from other countries would still be, even during war, if they became hot and lacking of water during the middle of a wartime, the enemy would supply them with what they needed to sustain life. That is thinking of other people in terms of God's children. I wrote a Substack not too long ago, several months ago, about a picture of a man that was in prison, and he had a real mess on his pants. And the story went that he had been convicted or accused. I think he was even accused, not convicted yet, of some kind of sex crime against children or whatever it was. And so the story was that he was sexually assaulted in jail. And people celebrated that. Oh, and then people do this all the time. Well, he did this kind of crime. I can't wait to see what happens when he goes to jail. That's wrong. That's the same thing as blaming victims of the vaccine issue. Although they made a bad choice, so did he. He made a bad choice. Were they sinning in making a bad choice? Maybe, maybe not. He definitely did, if he was actually guilty of it. Does that justify torture? According to our laws, no. We don't allow that in America. We have due process. We don't allow for the torture of criminals. We should never support such a thing. And like you said, I think if you take away, again, we come back to the ego heart. If you take away that element and you stop seeing people as humans, as God's children, it allows us to see hate first and foremost and become emotional rather than objective. And it's really important to keep an objectivity. You can have compassion. You know, the guy that stole your neighbor's chicken might be just starving. And yes, he did the wrong thing, but does that play a role in, or maybe he's mentally incapacitated? That's where the grand jury comes in. That's one of those examples I have from a grand jury perspective. The grand jury needs to be able to take into account the history, the person, the unique. That's why a grand jury should be made up of locals who can have access to understanding, fully comprehending the situation. Because we're people. Emotions do play a role, but we have to be objective when it comes to justice and keep in mind, what would Jesus do in this kind of scenario? That takes away the emotional impact and allows you to think with compassion and love, even in justice.
Perfect. Bill, you got 30 seconds. You want to follow this up and then Ralph?
Yeah, what are we told in the Old Testament? That mercy rejoiceth against judgment, right? There are cases where the Lord rejoiced over the destruction of his people. Read Deuteronomy 28. He makes that very clear. And the judgment and justice is what's missing in the nation. And though we ought not rejoice over the destruction of an individual, we have to rejoice over the judgment of the law. However, Karen, you are absolutely correct. When you talk about grand juries, one of the sole purposes of a grand jury is to be able to know the individual, the character, all of the facets of what was going on, and be able to find mercy where it's needed in every case. That does not mean mercy to the guilty, but rather mercy to the innocent, right? Like in the case of murder, mercy to the innocent is the destruction of the guilty, right?
Okay. Ralph, I'm going to give you just 1 second here, and then we got to move on, guys. I'm sorry. I could sit here and talk with you all day.
Yeah, some of the strongest Christians I know are the ones that screwed up the worst and then turned their lives around because they truly understand the gift of forgiveness that they were given.
Yes.
Agreed.
Amen.
Thank you guys so much for your wisdom and your time. I really appreciate you, and your friendship. And, I've said many times, we are all friends, and I can't think of finer people to stand with, because I would trust any one of you in any situation to do the right thing. And I know you well enough to be able to say that. So thank you so much. We're going to move on here to the next part of the show with Chris Kaijala. I got to tell you, you guys need to watch this because, you know what? I'm just going to say it right here. When all of the stuff came out on Gateway Pundit, I was a little smoked about that because I know who did all the work, and there were other people taking the credit of what Chris did. Chris is an exceptional researcher, and just really, really one of these people that you really should see his work, listen to what he has to say. Don't listen to these people spinning it. Go to the source, and the source is Chris Kaijala. In my opinion, he's the one that did all the heavy lifting. He knows what he's talking about. And so we're going to go to that right now, and I'll be back just in a few minutes here, or a few seconds. I'm just going to play this. And thank you guys so much. We'll be talking to you soon. Have a great day. I'll be right back. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it's the second day of October 2024, and I'm on today with Chris Kaijala. How you doing, Chris? Are you there?
Hello,
Can you hear?
how are you doing?
Good, really good. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Oh, that's awesome. I think we're gonna have a little bit of overlap here, just the way the connection is. So I'm gonna try to give long pauses in here so that I don't step on you and such. So we talked about all the work you did.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my connection, I think, fades a little bit every once in a while. So if I seem to slow down, it hopefully comes back right away.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to being on today and talking about there's some work being done right now on things for oversight of our elections, and you, in my opinion, were one of the most amazing researchers while this whole thing was going on with GBI Strategies, which is Gary Bell, and I think we need to talk about what happened there, as well as what's been going on behind the scenes. And I know you've got more information, and people need to hear this. We need to get this information out there. So we got 2 hours or however much time that you want to talk, because I really think this is critical for people to know.
Right. Well, thank you. Yeah, so the GBI story, I think, is never going to be over until the FBI either finishes their investigation or the AG in Michigan decides to do her job, because the story's been buried. And what's left in this story is probably the most important part of the story. And I could speculate out to what I really think happened, but I think it was buried for a reason. And what's I think more obvious is that there was fraud, or there was an attempt at fraud, and the Secretary of State knew exactly how much it was. They knew the extent of the fraud because they actually got the registrations that were fraudulent or inaccurate, and they didn't do anything with it. They could have, under the laws of the state of Michigan, they could have charged people with putting in fraudulent voter registrations, but they chose not to. There was a lot of other things that happened. GBI was a business in Michigan, so there was a lot of money that transpired over prepaid cards. We probably didn't get any tax money from any of the money that was sent. I think in Muskegon alone, they probably expended $50,000 to upwards of about 28 people. And that nothing ever came of that. And there were people all over the state that were hired to do this work. And if you've seen the Yehuda Miller FOIA, where they had an interview with the compliance officer from GBI. It was very clear that that person didn't really know what she was doing. She wasn't trained properly. I don't know how you do compliance on registrations to make sure that they're valid before you send them in. You know, they claimed that they had a database that they were checking against, but it was clear that they weren't doing adequate research on the ones that they were inputting, because there were upwards of 12,500 registrations that were put into the city of Muskegon. And of those, we're not sure how many actually made it into the voter registration files. There is a report from a reporter I talked to as direct conversation with the clerk in the city of Muskegon. She claims she put in 2,000 of them into the system, probably before she stopped. How many of those were actually valid? Not really sure. The ones that they knew that weren't valid were ones that had bad driver's license numbers and maybe birth dates or whatever. You know, the compliance officer should have known or tried to figure that out. I'm not sure how you do that. You know, you got a bunch of people all running up and down the street going to different houses, if that, in fact, that's what they were doing most of the time. And but I'm illegal to give 12,000 registrations to the city clerk. But from my research in the QVF in Muskegon County, those 12,000 were not people who lived in the city of Muskegon. And according to Michigan law, the clerk is responsible for the registrations in their community. You know, we've got 17 jurisdictions in this county. And when I went into the QVF, I saw about 8,000 new registrations that were listed. You know, this is about, I don't know, maybe a year after. No, it wasn't. It was the QVF for the December of 2020. There were about 8,000 registrations that were brand new that they claimed date-wise were in 2020. And I say that because there are a lot of registrations that come into our file that don't show as new, but I don't know where they came from. Ask me about that later. So you have about 8,000 or more registrations that were brand new in December of 2020. And then you go to 2022 and you look at the QVF and you ask it, well, how many new registrations were there in 2020? And you get 253. Okay, I don't know where those other 8,000 went, kind of disappeared. Now, I could ramble on through a bunch of data here, which is kind of important. I'll tell you the end story before I tell you some of the other data. It's a whole bunch of different things. I think last time I was on with you, I was very cautious not to say anything really bad about the clerks or about the Michigan Secretary of State, because seeing crazy stuff in the data doesn't mean that one person or another is specifically responsible for it. You got to find out who's responsible. And if you don't know who put that data in or why it's in there, what are you going to say? You can't point the finger at somebody and say that they're bad. So I was very cautious not to say anything like that. And if you know my report, which I did with a team in Muskegon, there were about 25 people or more that did this report. I ended up writing it at the end, but there were many, many people that expended many, many hours doing canvassing, doing research into dead people and all other things in the QVF. We took the QVF and sliced it and diced it a bunch of ways. And people can get that report on the Muskegon County GOP website. There's an article there called Anomalies in the 2020 Election. And that report, there's a link embedded in that news report where you can download that report and see it for yourself. The most interesting one, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, is the graph that shows registrations and population, which is really key. But getting back to this, at the end of the day, when you look at the data, and I've been with Election Integrity Force now since close to the end of 21, is when they started talking to me. And in Muskegon, we were kind of ahead of what they were doing, and then joined them, and been with them now for the last several years. And I'm right now I'm a poll training. I'm training poll challengers. So that training for EIF will start like October 19th is our first training date. We've got about 5 of them. People can go to our website and sign up for that. electionintegrityforce.com if you'd like to. And that's a very important thing. I've held from the very beginning that poll challengers is probably the most important election person that can be out there. And we can talk about that a little bit later, tell you the reason why. And I think, I've been preaching that for almost 3 years, and we worked very hard in Muskegon to get parity with conservative and democratic election workers, election integrity workers. And many of the clerks were very much against it. There was no parity, partly because we weren't pushing it and getting people to sign up. But when we did, we had tremendous resistance from them. Why? Right? This is supposed to be an even, honest system. That's why you have people on both sides to watch each other. Because as we know, the scripture says, man's heart is desperately evil. And I tell my sons all the time that you have an unlimited capacity for self-deception. We can say that we're doing the right thing, but inside we know what we really want to do. So I just want to lay that out because the progressive and woke mentality, their worldview, is that everybody is a nice guy and I'm the only one that knows the truth, which I find shocking. But anyway, that's another whole story. But getting back, so the clerks, the local clerks, I think are very honest and hard. And from what I've seen, most of the cheating is not being done by the clerks. Okay? The clerks in the bigger municipalities, I think, are problematic at best. They lean toward one side of the political spectrum really hard, and they try to make it impossible or very difficult for anyone else to get into the system. Why? I think they know that they're cheating. If they're not cheating, they have preferences, and they want those preferences to slide through as easily as possible, and they know that somebody watching them is going to make it difficult for them. Okay? This is a violation of their duty. It's a violation of honesty, of upholding the Constitution, whatever you want to call it. But they don't have our worldview. They don't believe in a fair system. They don't believe that you should just let people vote and let the chips fall where they may, because the Marxists want to take over. Okay? I used to call them socialists. Then I was calling a few people neo-Marxists. Right now, we're full-out Marxists, and I think you know that pretty well. My favorite Marxist incantation, which I'll attribute to James Lindsay of New Discourses, is the Kamala word salad that people used to call it. It's not a word salad. What is it? I can see what can be, unburdened by what has been. Okay, Lindsay has a detailed description of how he says that's actually a Marxist incantation, which comes pretty much from the likes of Mao Zedong in the Cultural Revolution. You have to erase the history of the people that you want to dominate so that they can't cling to things and disrupt your progress forward by remaking the pagan man. So the GBI story. Okay, so somebody comes up with 12,500 registrations and dumps them in mail packages and personally on the desk of the city clerk of Muskegon. And she starts processing them. If they weren't for her jurisdiction, I'm not sure why she's doing it. She shouldn't be, as far as I'm concerned. It may not be illegal, but she shouldn't be. And a larger issue, as you know, is that the Secretary of State has opened our QVF to a number of different people. They have direct access and ability to add, delete, and change things in our QVF. The worst of which I will point at is the ERIC system, a small group of 13 people backed by Soros-based operations that have full access to our QVF and that move things with impunity in and out of our. And I watched the Muskegon QVF enough to know that this is their own personal sandbox, and it's infuriating. The clerks don't know what's happening. Stuff shows up in there. They don't get a report. Nobody sends them a thing that says, oh, I added 100 people to your QVF. On the flip side, Secretary of State is supposed to be cleaning this thing out, and the local clerks are responsible for cleaning them out. I heard a report just recently where the Secretary of State says that she cleaned out over 800,000 registrations out of the in office. Well, that's nice. I don't know how she did that. I know that at least 20,000 were cleaned out of our file immediately. Up voters who actually voted, okay, both in person and AV.
Can you say that again, please? She cleaned out 8,000 voters out of Muskegon?
Yeah, the first quarter in 21, she cleaned out something like 20,000 registrations. And if you would post the graph, I could probably go through this, but there was a huge surge in registrations in Muskegon County in 2020 before the election. And then the first quarter of 21, she closed down the files all across the state. And I did a comparison against two different QVFs, one in May of 21 and the December. And I don't know, I might have gotten them from two different sources, but I'm not sure exactly how many names were cleaned out. But I found a difference of 20,000. You want the graphic with the line that looks like the climate change. Yeah, let's start with that one there. So, and of those 20, we figured out which 20,000 they were, and then we checked and saw, well, how many of these people voted? And it turned out over 6,000 of those were people who had voted in the 2020. For some reason, the Secretary of State could figure out that 20,000 people somehow were no longer eligible to be on the voter roll, and all of a sudden, I don't know how she does that. It's hard to figure it out. You got to really work at it to do it. She doesn't like cleaning the file in general, but the numbers didn't stay low. Immediately, another 10,000 were added back to the file. So if you look at this graph, I'm going to try to zoom in here a little bit so I can see it better. I have two graphs. This is the first one, and it shows you raw data. Okay, this purple line that's almost flat with the circles on it, okay, that growth in the population in Muskegon County. And I recommend anybody who wants to know what's going on in their county, go and get this data for your county. That's from the census. You take 2010 to 2020, there were 3,700 odd people that actually moved into our county. Okay, so over 10 years, that's only 370 people per year. So this is the average growth of this line is very, very flat. We don't have any growth in the Muskegon County. We got 173,000 people, maybe 300 people, 400 people a year net. Okay, so this other line down below, what is it, that a green with the little dots that's going up there? That's the data from the Secretary of State. Yeah, from 2015 on, she plots 3 points every year with how many registered voters there are in the county. In every county in Michigan, you can get this for every county. It's very interesting. The back here, you see the SOS data. I got a little arrow pointing to that bump there. Okay, that little bump is the Hillary Clinton election. For some reason, there was a bump in registrations, and I didn't think too much of that until I talked with Dr. Franks about his results. Dr. Franks went around in 21 and said that every county in Muskegon and across the nation, I think there were a lot of, I don't want to quote him on that, but in every county in our state has a surge of registrations just before a major election, a presidential election. And then they drop off after the election. Why? I don't know, but you can see the bump there. That's the Secretary of State's number, not my number. Now you can see the rise, this line that goes through, the flat line that goes through there that I'm pointing to on the lower right-hand corner. I've got a description in there. That line is the average increase in voter registrations in our county. I just drew a line through that Secretary of State's data. And the average rise in registrations every year from 2015 to about 2019 is 1,250. And there's some tables in the report that show the exact numbers. So you got 70 people, let's call 400 people a year moving into the county. But every year we had 1,250 registrations. Okay, so that's a pretty good voter turnout thing, except Republicans weren't doing anything up until 2020. Nothing significant to get the vote out or to get people registered. So, Denver County, very, very active. We're a blue collar union town. But over the last 10 years, the data shows that the Democratic vote has been decreasing pretty radically. In 2020 was almost a dead heat in terms of people that would vote each way. But the important thing is here that Benson got elected in 2018, I believe. Okay. And in 2019, she put Eric on the job. She hired them to help keep our QVF up to date and clean. That was the purported purpose of Eric. Okay. And they got contracts all over the country to do the same thing. Well, you can see at the end of 2019, the line starts to change. It starts to tick up. Now it's public knowledge, and Benson has quoted herself in the public saying that she wants 100% voter registration for all adults in the state of Michigan. That was one of her goals in life. And I looked at some recent data that showed Harvard does some kind of rating system on election systems in every state, and we were down there a little bit on the rating system. And she touted recently that she had gotten a really good 9% voter registration is pretty much what Judicial Watch says is a reasonable number.
How much was that, Chris? The connection's coming in and out a little bit.
Do I have you back? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. So what was that percentage they were
Internet
talking?
kind of goes spacey every once in a while.
Yeah, well, when we're all on the road and over the internet, there's things that just kind of yeah.
Well, I'm living right now about 30 minutes from Springfield. Oh, that's another story.
Okay, I would assume.
So 89% was what Harvard gave the rating for voter registration in Muskegon. In the state of Michigan, before Benson came in. And right now she's got a much higher rating, about 91%. And the criterion that they use, I think, are a little bit kind of bogus, but 89% is very reasonable. It's kind of high because Judicial Watch says typically only 85% of adults get registered to vote. above that, the last 15% of the population really doesn't care. They're not going to register. They don't care about voting. They don't want to come out. Okay. Of that, 85% is what the turnout is in the election, percentage wise. Okay. So the whole reason I started looking into data, I'm a chemical engineer. Okay. I love data. I do a lot of it. I'm good on Excel, so I can do charts and things like that. But in the 2020 election, our county clerk said there was a 65% turnout, 67% turnout. I was like, what? That's not possible. It's completely crazy. Trump was on the ticket. People were going out. I had a guy, a union carpenter, that he had flipped from being a Democrat about a year or two before. He was out knocking doors. He said 75% of the union carpenters in Muskegon County were going to vote for Trump. Okay? The union guys, they know the difference between somebody that can do something and help them. And they weren't taking the blue line anymore. They were going to vote a different way. Okay, so I started digging into the data. That's how this data came about. Now, if you see the uptick, this relates to the uptick here. So in 2019, we had over 17,000 registrations added to our file. Okay, 17,000. I don't care who you are. That's not right. There's no possible reasonable explanation for 17,000 registrations being added to our file because only 400 people moved in the county that year. Okay, let's call it 2,000. Okay, maybe there is no new jobs in our county. There are no new plants opening up. There is no reason for the thing to go above, like I said, if you go to 2022, November, December, and you ask how many registrations were new in 2020, 253. That's perfectly reasonable. It fits the data. It's not, I don't know if it's 85% of 400, but it's pretty close. So somebody's monkeying with the file. And Eric is the prime reason, I believe, but Rock the Vote and a bunch of other people have direct access into our file. And normal constituents who want to get this information couldn't get any information on who actually put stuff in the file. Okay. Now, the Secretary of State was sued in 2019 because she wasn't cleaning the file. There were 17 counties that were involved in that suit. Some of them were Macomb and places east. Muskegon was not part of that. And she lost that suit. She decided that if the guy who sued would take the local clerks off the suit, that she would take some people off the QVF. So she ended up dumping about 177,000 names off. And I got a copy of that file. I did the data on the counties. And it turned out to be about 8% of the population of those counties was what she dumped on average, 8%.
Wow.
And if you look at the file, most of those names that were taken off were people that got driver's licenses in 2015 and 2016. Okay, these are people that have been carried on the files for years and years, and she knew that they should come off. Office, there was stuff on there from before her. She didn't take it off. Matter of fact, the word on the street was, I don't have the direct reference for this, but she took a bunch of old data that Terry Land and Johnson had taken off in previous years, and she dumped it back into our file, into the state of Michigan. So now she's claiming she cleaned up 800,000. But I'll tell you, EIF has found that there's at least 800,000 registrations currently right now that have significant problems with them. Okay? They don't have addresses for apartments. There's dead people. There's people that the post office won't deliver to anymore. Their addresses are wrong. people with apartment numbers on their addresses that are out of range for what the apartment complex has for apartment numbers, you know, and there's people that are, you know, registered to commercial addresses. You go on and on. And in each one of those categories, it seems like a fairly small number, but you got 800,000 of them. If she claims in the state of Michigan at about 8 million, there's only 6.5 million voters, real voters in this state, but we've got 8 million on the
Can you
rolls.
repeat that again? Can you go back just a little bit? It froze up, and when you came in, it was a little bit garbled.
Okay. I can see my signal going up and down here. I should probably pause when it's down low.
Yeah.
So there's 8 million on the rolls. There should only be 6.5 million real voters. But, you know, there's, we know there's close to 800,000, 850,000 that should be cleaned off now because they're problematic registrations that have all kinds of deficiencies. The post office won't deliver, or the addresses are wrong, or they're at commercial addresses, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole long list. EIF recently put out data to all the clerks in the state saying, here's a list, look at it. I think these are people you need to, you know, take off your rolls. And we use the word challenge in there, that we challenge them. The state immediately came out with some guidance and told every clerk, no, you can't take these off. This is the law, this and that, and this and that. They never said what you could do. Matter of fact, the city of Roosevelt Park, which is very small, one of the trustees asked the clerk to clean the files up. She says, I can't. I'm not allowed. That's really true. It's untrue that she can't clean up files. She can clean them up, but the Secretary of State keeps giving orders to the county and the local clerks. These orders that they send out basically say that the Secretary of State is taking more and more responsibility away from the local jurisdictional clerks. Okay, and our system in Michigan is very unique because our election system really is run by the local jurisdictional clerk. You're supposed to have full control over the data, over the election, and over accumulating the results and everything. But in the last few years, the Secretary of State is changing this pretty radically. You may not know, a lot of jurisdictional clerks have gotten a lot of heat from the Secretary of State for just questioning why we're doing what we're doing. Stephanie Scott down in, where's it, Adams Township, I think down near Jackson, is a prime example. They actually fired her basically from her job for doing her job. Chuck Richard was the canvas board chair. Got some problems here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can right now. You got to go back to Chuck Richard.
So Chuck Richard.
We're going to keep plowing through here, guys, but we may have to go to a phone call. Okay, start over again. Try Chuck Richard.
Right. Chuck was the chairman of the Oceana Canvas Board. They went behind his back to try to eliminate him off the board because he wrote a letter to the county clerk and to the Secretary of State early in 21 and said, unless you put in corrective actions to not allow these problems to occur again, I'm not going to certify the May election. They tried to remove him from the board illegally and lied to him. And then the Secretary of State went behind his back to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners voted him out because that was the only way he could be taken out. He sued them. And the Secretary of State and the clerk lost. Sidney Powell was his lawyer. Okay? He didn't want his job back. It's an interesting story. This is one of the first instances where the Michigan Secretary of State punitively tried to hurt people that questioned how the election was being run. Okay? So, there's many stories of that happening now in a lot of different places. Okay, so back to the graph. So you have over 17,000 registrations that are entered during 2020, and we found out later that the GBI group was in the county of Muskegon, and they had 12,500 registrations in play, more or less. It's hard to tell exactly because nobody will say. Secretary of State won't give anybody accounting for the numbers of registrations or how many got actually into the file. Now, when I wrote this report, I was looking for little stories that I could put in the footnotes of, so people could see other election stories. I came across this really small story on the internet about how the city clerk had found some bad registrations and turned them in, called the police. And so I sat on that for a while because I had so many things going on. My friend Keith Hinkle out of Grand Rapids and I were talking all the time about data, even before the 2020. And he told me, he says, you got to look into that. That's important. I said, I don't have any time for that. I got so many things going on, right? He said, no, you got to do this. Actually, I found the chief investigator of Michigan State Police out in Grand Rapids area, called him up and said, I'd like to sit down and talk with you about this news story. So I've interviewed him twice now, and he's the one who gave us the actual file number, the case number, and we FOIA'd. Actually, it was Keith who FOIA'd election integrity people across the state. Nobody did nothing. Nobody would talk about it, put it out in the news, study it or whatever. So Keith and I said, what are we going to do? We don't know anybody. Nobody's going to publish anything from us. So we gave it to Phil Halloran at the MIGOP at the time. He had a connection with Gateway Pundit, and he published the story. And he asked if we wanted our names on it. We said, not really, but it's okay. Just publish it. It's more important that it gets published. I'm not really interested in getting credit for it. So he published it, and then a flurry of articles came out. And that was good. So I'll do this chart again and then talk about GBI a little bit more. So if you look at this chart really closely, I'm pointing to the top of the Secretary of State's data here. And that says October 2020. That's the last piece of data that she reported in October, just before the election. We don't know when that was, if it's October 1st, October 15th, don't really know. I kind of assumed it was October 15th. But then her data continues to the right. So you can see there's an increase in the line, and then there's a little bumpy doodle, and you go back down to a lower number. Okay, now if you connect those dots, you would be assuming that nothing happened in between, just like down in the 16 election. 2016, you got a little bump. What's going on there? I don't know. Is that the largest number? Well, you got to assume that it is because she reported it, right? Well, you'd be incorrect. Because up above that little gap in the line there, got two little triangles. The first triangle is what the county clerk reported at the election. How many people were registered at the time of the election? 147,000 or 148,000 were on our rolls at the election time. Okay, how many voters are there in this county? 115,000. How many real voters? 115,000. Okay, you can push that up to 120,000. Even if we were at 125,000, which is what shows on the graph here, which I know is inflated to start with, you can do the math. 115 to 145,000 is 30,000. So I'm telling people, and I've told them for a long time, I still believe it's true, we have somewhere between 20 and 30,000 expired or fraudulent registrations in our county. Okay, now if you do that based on total population, you're over by, I don't know, 9%, 15%. It's way over, way over. If you do it based on real voters, it's like 20%. There's 20% more registrations than there are real voters in this county, give or take. It's a round number off the top of my head, pretty close. Okay. Now, if you go into the next year, somewhere around 20,000 disappear, and 6,000 were voters. Seth Keschel did an analysis on our last 10 years of data, 2020, looking for hot zones. Where do the voting trends not track properly? And his results were that 10 out of our, how many do we have? We had 74 precincts. I think there were 10 of them that were abnormal. There were more voters one way or the other than there should have been if the trends were reasonably even. And like I said, there's been no special influx of people. I was on the apportionment commission for Muskegon County when they redid all the lines. The Democrats decided to go from 7 to 5 commissioners. They had to redraw all the lines, and what they did is they spread the city of Muskegon and Muskegon Heights out into the other jurisdictions to try to get more Democrats into more commissioner districts so they could own the commissioner board. And the demographics show that people were moving out of the cities into the more rural areas, and the more rural areas were voting red. It's another whole story. So if you go to the next graph,
what was another whole story?
How they changed the districts so that the Democrats could get elected again. They recently had problems actually in Muskegon. I think GBI wrote another story on that. Yeah, keep going down till you hit the next graph. They had to cut several of the precincts in half to get the commissioner districts evened out, and the ballots weren't properly done. So there's the number. The total on the voter rolls was 148,000 and change, and then it was by the end of the year they had added another 1,000, went up to 149,000 here, which is that second green dot to the right, QVF data. The green triangle, the green triangle on the left of those two is what the Muskegon County clerk reported on our election results. So I dotted line between there. That is actually what happened to our file during the 2020 election. Okay? And Dr. Franks' data is like identical to this. He shows for all these jurisdictions across the state, for all the major elections, the midterms, I believe, and the presidentials, that there's a bump in registration data just like this all over the entire state, and then it goes down afterwards. So the three dots on the right are after, well, those are what the Michigan Secretary of State quoted as being the active registrations in the county in 2021. She eliminated a whole bunch, then put a whole bunch back in. And some of those numbers, like I mentioned before, there were somewhere like 6,000 people who actually voted who got eliminated out of the file. I don't know how she knows that they moved, because people weren't taking people that got driver's licenses out of the files back in 2015 and 16. My son, who moved to Boston, got a driver's license in Massachusetts in 2010. He's still on our files. Okay. Massachusetts took me off after 2 regular elections after I left the state. I didn't have to ask them. They follow the HAVA rules. This state, the Secretary of State recently said that it's a 6-year. It's a 6-year wait to get somebody off the file. They go 3 major elections. But EIF noticed recently in the last 2 months that a whole bunch of registrations in our files who were inactive all of a sudden were activated. They weren't activated because of the election, because we were in between elections. All of a sudden, boom, switch was turned. A whole bunch of people are active. Why? I don't know, but I think it means that now there's another 6-year countdown that's going to count on these people. So once you vote once, then you start another 6-year countdown. But how do you get activated if you voted? I don't know. Who did that? I don't know. It's not right. You know, what's the one job of a clerk? You know, you collect data, you report data. You're supposed to serve the people of the state by keeping the records accurate. I will tell you emphatically, if she is keeping accurate records, she's not telling anybody, because when you ask for the records, they're not right. They're monkeying around with this thing to the tune, in our county, of tens of thousands of voter registrations. Not to mention the GBI, which is another 12,000. We have histograms. If you go into the Gateway Pundit articles, there's histograms of how many registrations appear every day. And there's like 100. And 2 days later, there's 200. And then it'll go up to 300 and then back down to 100. How do you get 100 people registered every day for a week, a month, 6 months? And then there's a dump from the Secretary of State's license registration program, and you'll get, 3,000. Now, I'll tell you, if you get married, they give you a new voter ID, and your maiden name doesn't necessarily disappear. It's still in the voter files as your maiden name. Did they tell you that? Why do they do that? Why don't they just change your name and keep your voter registration ID the same? Now you got a duplicate in the file. Who's cleaning that out? Secretary of State should know exactly who that is. The county clerk knows exactly who that is. They should have a routine to clean it out. They don't. Okay, we got a person who's actually involved in running elections down in the south part of the state, and she got a state ID. She's been married since 2006. All of her voter identification stuff is in her married name. She got this identification card, and it had her correct married name and everything on it. And the signature at the bottom was the signature with her maiden name. It was her actual signature, written with her maiden name. Okay. Now just ponder that for a moment. How is it possible? If you have records since 2006, you've been living here, you got your married name is on all your identification, on all your voter information, and the state gives you a document that has your maiden signature on the bottom. Okay? Somebody is screwing with the files. And somebody goofed on that one. How do you goof doing that? I don't know, but what it means is not only her signatures, but I would dare say virtually everyone's signature has been scanned. Okay, if you've ever signed a petition for changing a law or adding something to the system or putting a candidate in, I would dare say, this is my supposition, somebody's database, and they can use them. There actually was a video out in 2021. You can take the signature scan and put it into a CNC machine, and you put a pen in the hand of the CNC, and it'll duplicate that signature onto a document exactly
Wow.
the way that it is in the file. There's people that are capable of doing that.
Can I tell you what? Can I tell you what I saw? I went to a board of canvassers meeting that in Lansing, and there was a guy that was doing signature verification there. His name was Mark. I've got his last name written down too, and it's public record because it was in an open meeting there. But he actually claimed, as being there, he was there really, if you want to distill it down, to protect his industry of signature verification. What he said in that meeting shocked me to my core, because he said, we took all the signatures. So Jonathan Brader, the Bureau of Elections, let him in to see all the petitions. They scanned them all, walked out the door with them, sent them to Bangladesh for signature verification, and said that they compared them to the signatures that they already had on file in Bangladesh.
So repeat that. I missed some of it. They sent it to Bangladesh. Do that?
Sent it to Bangladesh for signature verification. So, and the kicker was that Bangladesh already had the signatures on file from previous elections to compare them to.
Right. Well, see, the county and city clerks should have some kind of high level signature verification like that for the elections. They don't, right? And we know in the 2020 that Benson suspended the signature rules almost completely. You know, if there was a loop-de-loop on there to look sort of similar to another loop-de-loop, she said just accept it. And this was when she flooded the zone with AV ballots and applications. I have a friend who lives in the city of Muskegon. She got 5 folded up card application request forms from outside the state, from Illinois and California, pre-printed with her name on one of them, saying, hey, get yourself an absentee ballot. And then there was another one for the guy that she bought the house from 15 years prior. And there was another one and another one and another one. The 3 other ones, she didn't recognize any of the names, but I assume that they were all voters who lived at that location at some time in the past. Now, with the signature verification rules at the time of the 2020, she could have signed every one of those applications in her own handwriting with the names on those applications, and she would have gotten 5 ballots to prevent that from happening. Okay? So if you sign a petition, or if you've signed one in the past, somebody's got your signature. Okay, if you look at the GBI Strategies people, they had a scanner in Southfield, which was what the main office where the compliance officer was. So every registration that they got from anybody, they scanned that and sent it to GBI, who was down out of Tennessee. GBI ran these kind of operations in all the swing states, according to the Michigan State Police, who did the investigation, and they were involved in at least 20 states. GBI was investigated. You can get this on the Gateway Pundit articles. They did the research on this. GBI was funded in Muskegon by Joe Biden's campaign and by another Democratic senatorial campaign. Okay, and GBI got, and that was a few million for Michigan, and they got much more to do all these other states. But Gary Bell, who started GBI, purportedly started 70 different NGOs. He's responsible for setting up and operating 70 NGOs across the country. Okay, so a whole bunch of stories about that. Look at the Gateway Pundit article stuff on the numbers of registrations happening in Muskegon and all the problems surrounding this. But let's get back to the beginning again. Nobody who put in a faulty registration, GBI Industries, the compliance officer who already had warrants out for herself when she was interviewed by the Michigan State Police, or anybody who went door to door, got indicted for election crime. I think every one of those is a felony, right? So there's at least 10,000 felonies. Maybe there's 12,000. The AG won't give us any numbers. The Secretary of State knows exactly how many of those are bad, how many were felonies, how many were just, I don't know, mistakees, and how many got into the file. She knows exactly the number. She's not saying. And what's bad about it is she claimed that the election was perfect. It was just like Trump. I made a perfect call to Ukraine. Well, Benson's out there saying everything's good. Don't look around. I got everything under control. I'm cleaning the file. Everything's fine. We certified everything. Okay, fine. It's not right what happened over here. How many of these votes were illegal votes? There's no telling. But one thing sure, everybody argues about a lot of where's the fraud coming from. Did you hear the news about the Venezuelan election recently? Maduro purportedly lost by 30% of the vote. And the only reason we know that is because a whole bunch of volunteers were at all of the precincts across the entire country, and they collected the results at the precinct, and they added them up. They lost by 30% in the 80 precincts that they could count. The other 20 precincts, he sent thugs out to stop people. That's not right. Wait a minute. That's not right. Let me go check the numbers on that.
I think you're locked up again, Chris. This is unfortunate, but it is what we do when we're on live video. It comes in and out a little bit. So
when I see it's spin like that, I stop talking. But yeah, so Maduro, wins by 1% when they recount the vote. But they use Dominion machines down there. You know that.
Yes. So those machines spit out whatever they tell them to spit out, and it's like that's what I saw, is that this is like hacked at the programming at the operating system level.
Well, what's interesting to me about the Maduro election, it means that they didn't hack it at the voting machine level. They hacked it after they brought the data back to whoever accumulating the data. Now, I think that is probably the case, because I've seen, in the city of Muskegon, I was a challenger in their AV counting board for several years. They never gave us a report of what the vote was. And I didn't realize I could get a copy of this until a couple of years ago. And we asked them for it, and they wouldn't give it to us. Matter of fact, I was standing there when everybody was gone one year. I don't know if it was the 22 election. And the person who was there, they stuck a thumb drive into this machine that they've been scanning all these ballots. It was the tally machine. I was expecting them to print a report out from that machine. Oh, no, that's not the tally machine. That's just a scanner. She loads up the data onto the thumb drive. She says, I got to go up to my office now that everybody's gone home, and I'm going to complete the tally. I said, what? So you can't do that. You have to put that in a bag and put a on that and take it to the county clerk. Oh, no, I got to finish the tally first. Says, well, who's up there with you? Nobody, just me. Okay, now, this is the city of Muskegon. Now, to be fair, we had a recount of Prop 2 and Prop 3. in the city of Muskegon, and we did, I don't know how many of the 14 precincts there, and they were pretty close. They didn't screw the vote. They were within 5 or 10 votes of the actual ballots that we recounted, and all the bags were sealed. We didn't have any problems with bags being unsealed. But the problem is no chain of custody, number one, zero confidence that, if you had a different clerk or somebody who wanted to cheat, you could do that in a heartbeat. Okay. And two, even though the counts were close, we had the Board of Elections, second in command to the Board of Elections, come and commandeer our county canvass board, because the law says the canvass board is responsible 100% for recounts. They're supposed to run it, make all decisions related to it. No, the Board of Elections came in and said, sit over here. You can't do that. You can just watch, and I'm going to do it. Okay. So they count everything up. What's the count? You're supposed to have accuracy on these machines of 1 in 125,000 ballots. If you have 125,000 ballots, only one can be mistaken or wrong. So the tally machine and the scanner in the city of Muskegon was purchased with money from Zuckerberg's CTLR, whatever. They spent $100,000 on this puny little scanner and a computer to do the tally. $100,000. And what was their accuracy rate? Well, I backed the numbers out of how many errors there were in the there were 30 errors per 100,000 in the counts for Prop 2 and Prop 3. Okay, you're not even close. You're not even close. You scan the ballots don't match the hand count. And we objected. I was the captain of that recount in Muskegon. We objected we had 17 objections that we begged all the way up to the state canvass board. And about those 17, I think 12 of them or so were specific ballots, wrong color ink, other kinds of problems with them. And they look at the ballot and they would say, oh, I can see who they voted for. Well, I said, fine, I can see who they voted for too. But that's not what the count says. The machine said, you have a different count. This ballot has got problems with it according to the law. It didn't use the right ink, or there's other problems with the ballot. And the fact that you can see who they really voted for means you should be hand counting all your ballots. I would be fine with that. But the machine counted this one and didn't get some of them right. I don't know if it got this one wrong. It didn't get them all right. And so you prove my point, but they wouldn't acknowledge any of the challenges, any of them, even though they were according to the law. We made challenges according to the law. Goes up to the state canvass board, and you know what happened there? They didn't accept one challenge, I don't think, of all the challenges that came in from that recount. And they charged us like $400,000 to do that recount.
Oh, you're
the actual value of that recount was like $5,000, $6,000, $10,000. And they ballooned the recount cost up just to try to prevent us from doing it. And we had a donor who was willing to spend for. I mean, it was thievery. It was stealing. Okay. And the results came out bad, and they didn't do anything about it. Okay. So I can continue on, but in general, the Secretary of State lost at least 5-6 court cases. And when she begged them up to the Supreme Court, they let her have her way. She still hasn't corrected anything.
So basically, they're all in this together, and it looks like it's a whole complicit group of these people who literally stepped outside of the law and then sat there and helped hide each other's wrongdoings with the court system involved in it.
Well, the appeals court is not in the bag because they made some good decisions.
Good to know.
The Court of Claims made some good decisions. But, when it gets to the Supreme Court, did you hear that? I think Pat Colbeck posted that just before the last Supreme Court decision that went her way, trying to take JFK the ballot, the appeals court said that she didn't have a legal standing in the law or a good reason not to take him off the ballot, and they ordered her to. And the Supreme Court said, no, yeah, you can do whatever you want. But there was an $82,500 donation made from Jocelyn Benson's PAC to the PAC of the Supreme Court justice who made the final report, 4-3 decision, to let her do.
How can this be happening in the United States of America?
Well, I'll tell you how it's happening, because we're all sitting on our hands at home watching TV. That's why it's happening.
And you know what? And the other thing is that people are going to these, I hate to say it, I love coffee as much as the next person. It's probably my elixir of life, right? But the point being is that we're going to all of these meetings that are meetings based on having all this knowledge, but nobody's doing anything. And so if you sit there and you're just listening but not willing to do anything, you don't even have to know everything about what to do, but you've got to do something. Chris, do you mind if I take a quick break here and come right back?
Okay.
Do you have some more time? Because I'm going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, we're right back after our short break, back with Chris Kaijala. And the crimes committed in the state of Michigan, I feel pretty comfortable to say that these are complicit crimes, and it is not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy. It's criminal conspiracy to defraud the people of Michigan. In my opinion.
Yeah, you want my opinion on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Let her loose, because I don't censor here. You can say whatever you want.
Well, as usual, life is complicated. So the way that people are cheating in Michigan gives everybody plausible deniability to a certain point. I don't think the clerks are responsible for cheating, although I got a lot of questions about what happened with GBI and why the clerks won't talk, why the Secretary of State won't give out information. That is bad. You should fire the whole damn bunch of them for that alone.
And who would you fire? You would fire all the clerks?
Well, they should fire the clerk in the city of Muskegon and any staff that's responsible for making some of the decisions they've made. The Board of Elections management needs to be fired because of what they've been doing. I could go on and on about what the Board of Elections is doing to prevent challengers and organizations like EIF from getting real information, real data that they can be watchdogs for the election. They're making it completely impossible. The Secretary of State is a joke. And I have data to prove it. EIF has combed through 8 million voter registrations month after month. And you know what? We asked for the AV ballot returns, and we've been asking for the last 4 years for them. All of a sudden, they won't give us any data. They'll send us a list of some names. They don't give us any data. And they have some kind of an excuse for it. But they know that we don't have any lawyers, because what is the AG doing? punitively punishing any lawyer who even thinks about sticking their head up. So, there's a conspiracy of worldview. I can't remember who said this. I heard this on some talking heads. But because these people all think alike, they don't necessarily sit down in the room and come up with a plan. Their worldview and their ideas about how to govern are so polluted that they just do this automatically. For a Supreme Court justice who's a Democrat, as far as I'm concerned, ought to have their head examined because of what the Supreme Court. Give you one example.
Go back to because of what the Supreme Court, because you started saying that and it cut out again, please. Oh, we're locked up again, Chris.
So I'll start again. So the Supreme Court made a series of 5-6 decisions related to things that Benson was accused of doing. And they let her off the hook on almost every case. Okay? One of them was she changed the challenger rules and they were illegal. They were deemed illegal by the Court of Claims. It was like a year or so ago. And they waited and they pushed this thing back till a month before the election. And then the Supreme Court said, oh, we're going to put a stay on this. You don't have to correct the rules right now. And they went and she still lost, I think, at the Supreme Court on the challenger rules. She hasn't changed them. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I was going to challenge 52 ballots in this. These people did not live there anymore. I had good reason to believe they did not live there anymore. They would not let me challenge them. They wouldn't even record my challenge because of directions from the Board of Elections. And in the challenger rules, which is the same right now, it used to be on about page 18 or 19, there's a paragraph in there that says that because the jurisdictional clerk has looked at these, she has a process in her office that determines the eligibility of the voter. And because the ballot is in the counting board, that means that the clerk has determined that this voter is eligible to vote. Therefore, as a challenger, I cannot challenge the eligibility to vote anymore. I have to be in the clerk's office when she's looking at it and does this mysterious process. And they had to call the Board of Elections, and the Board of Elections said, no, don't write it down and don't do it. So there's not even a record of my challenge. Okay, so what is the process that the city clerk has to now determine the eligibility of the voter? I asked the deputy clerk. She looked at me kind of strange, like, what are you talking about? I said, well, the challenger rules say that you have a process where you determine the eligibility. What have you doing different now that you weren't doing last year? She said, nothing. She said, we get a request for a ballot, we send it out, we get it back, we look at the signature or whatever, and we process it, put it in the box. It comes down here. Nothing different. So, but I know there's 52 people who the post office won't deliver to. They have permanent change of address. Why doesn't the clerk know that they have permanent change of address? She can get the NOPC list from the U.S. Post Office just like we do. She didn't. Okay. So I can't challenge 52 ballots. Now, I'll tell you, in a commissioner election in 2020, there were 52% of the ballots were AV ballots. It was the first time we had AV ballots in 2020 that were, more than maybe 10 or 15% of the total vote. 8,300 some votes, 52% of them were mail-in. The person won in the walk-in, they won 60% of the vote in the walk-in. And when the mail-ins were all counted, they lost by 292 votes out of 8,300. did the of what they said it was.
Say that
And our
again. Did
group
the
canvassed.
what? Go back again. We're locking up. Sorry.
That's all right. 5 or 10 votes here or there in each precinct were not right, but it was pretty close. So the person said, okay, well, I guess I lost. First time we'd ever done a recount. It was hard to, I was there. It was hard to tell, but there was somebody who told me afterwards that a whole bunch of the mail-in ballots were not folded. I said, why didn't you tell me? You can't have unfolded mail-in ballots, because if they're mailed to you, they're folded. So they have to be folded when they get sent back. Even if the person hands it over the counter to the clerk, it's still folded. Okay, so we went out and canvassed a bunch of homes. We got 150 responses. We found a list of 1,600 people. Chuck Jacobs got this list for me out of the QBF. He said in that 8,300 votes, there were 1,600 people that had not voted in 10 years, and all of a sudden decided to vote. He said, if you're going to find something, you're probably going to find it in this group. Okay, so this is only 1,600 out of the 8,000 some votes. We canvassed 250 homes, 150 people opened the door. Somewhere between 25 and 40% of those were bad. Person had moved away before the election, didn't live in the jurisdiction, didn't live in the state. Some of them moved overseas. One person had committed suicide before the election. Okay, and some of the registrations were bad registrations. Okay, so we said, okay, we only did about 100. That might not be representative. I think that's in the report. We recently did a virtual canvass on the rest of those 1,600, and 40% plus are bad registrations. The people either don't exist or they moved long before the election. I flipped over from the page and I put my finger on one, 2 pages to the back. It's 95 pages of listing. And I did a background check. The person lived in the jurisdiction in 2014 for about 2 years, then moved out of the state, moved back into the county, but didn't live in the jurisdiction. They voted in that race. They should never have voted. They're not legal to vote. I don't know if they had an absentee ballot, but that was one of the bad voters. So look at what's happening is there's a lot of registrations that are not, they're expired. I believe most of these registrations are probably real people at some point in the past. The clerks can't tell if they really live in the jurisdiction. They can't tell. And so they process it. They got a signature card or they got an application way back when. They never cleaned the file out. Secretary of State never cleaned the file out. So they look like real voters. So what's a challenger going to do? I had a second to the Board of Elections. I was standing in the recount. I had one of my recount people sitting there watching ballots, and she went to challenge a ballot, and she was getting pushback. And she called me over, and I said, what's wrong? She said, well, and the lady, the second in charge, the Board of Elections, walked up to the table, was listening, and she looked at my challenger, this woman, really nice Christian woman, very quiet, and said, do you want to take away that voters vote? And I said, this is voter intimidation. I mean, challenger intimidation. That's a felony. You cannot intimidate a challenger. And this is before they made the rule that allowed election officials to claim intimidation and harassment from challengers, okay? Another thing that the illustrious SOS has done to intimidate challengers on the whole. And I was stunned. And I looked at this woman and I said, look, you're not challenging the voter. You're challenging that ballot. You don't a person who really was allowed to vote. So you're not challenging a person's, you're not taking away somebody's vote. You're making sure that the election is done properly according to the rules. And if you have a challenge to make, you are perfectly within the law and you're right to do so. And nobody should tell you to not do it and make you feel shame might be hurting some person. That's intimidation. That came from this person second in charge to the Board of Elections in the recount.
Can you tell me who that person's name
Okay.
was?
And just, what's that?
Can you tell me who that person's name was?
I can't. It's a woman. Can't remember her name. I could look it up. I don't know her name off the top. I'd recognize her if I saw her.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
But so anyone who wants to be involved in the election and do their duty in the election is treated like a stray dog wandering onto your property who's hungry. You know, not only they don't want you, but they're actively doing things to prevent you from doing not honest. They're not fair. And, you know, the Secretary of State imposed this liaison because they were getting so many challenges. I could tell you more and more stories about how the challenger rules have changed and how the direction from the Board of Elections has made challengers a pariah to election officials. And now they passed a law saying that challenger can be charged with a felony for harassing an election worker. That's always been the case. You can't harass somebody. You know, you can get kicked out for doing bad things. And we had some people kicked out in 2020, and the guy was a jerk. He was a pain in the ass. But they put hands, local security in Detroit put hands on him and dragged him out of the building. That was an assault, you know, but he couldn't prosecute anybody for it. So people need to do challenging. Pat Kolbeck is not accurate when he says they've made challenging illegal. They've functionally made it impossible because they've intimidated every honest, straightforward person from walking into the lion's den and potentially getting charged with a felony. So when we do training, we tell people you need to go with somebody else. You need to have a witness there. Because if you walk into a place where they dislike you, and you know, the rhetoric from the left and the Democratic Party has made virtually anybody that would vote for, you know, Donald Trump into an evil, seditious person, just by definition. So if you go in there to try to make the election fair, there are a lot of people that consider you to be an evil person right the way you walk in. That's bigotry. It's hate. And anytime Biden or Kamala says they want to bring people together and yeah, they want to bring everybody that believes like they do together. Okay, I grew up in Massachusetts. The lefties up there have been doing it since as long as you agree with them, everything's fine. If you don't, then there's something wrong with you. That's how narcissistic the worldview is. That only I know what's right, and you have to do and believe everything that I say, right? And so I know you like to talk about sovereignty in the beginning of the country. When people say freedom of speech is the greatest thing in America, it's the foundation of our Western democracy, I say, no, it's not. Freedom of speech comes from one other principle that's more important than free speech. And that's personal sovereignty. And personal sovereignty, as far as I'm concerned, comes from the kingdom of God and the scriptures, going back all the way into the Old Testament, as far as you can go. God put us on this earth to have dominion, to be responsible stewards, to love each other and create good community. And you know the story. The heart is desperately wicked above all things. And Cain killed Abel. And here we are, 6,000 years later, we haven't learned a damn thing. And the gaslighting is getting so bad, it's just wicked. It's gotten to the point of being wicked. And I remember when I was a kid, they used to say, oh, Christians are bigoted. You guys are judgmental. You know, you shouldn't be involved in the election process. Well, now the Democrats are more bigoted than any Christian I knew, even the moral majority guys back in the 70s, right? They treat us like, I don't want to mention it on the air. So it's shocking. They all do it because they all believe that they're right. And this, I'm sure this is the way the Marxists were in Cuba, in Venezuela, you just name a country, the Russians, because the Marxist worldview is, completely different than the Christian worldview. And the Christians that are out there don't understand when they're talking to people and they hear the language, they don't understand how alien the worldview is of these people. And they wander around and try to get away with everything that they can. There's only one solution. I knew in 21, I told Dr. Franks this. I said, in 21, there was no politicians going to fix this. There's no court that's going to fix this. The people in Muskegon County who are in the government, they're all Democrats and they're all scratching each other's back and they're happy about it. They're not going to fix this. There's only one thing that's going to fix this. And I've been saying this for 4 years, and you can ask anybody. I think I told it to you last time I was here. People have to get out and canvass the QVF and find all the expired registrations. Once you find that, then a challenger can go into the polls. You can get the AV ballots. I even developed a technique to challenge expired registrations and walk-in polls. You don't need a computer. You don't need a phone app. You don't need a shiny little toy, because everybody's out there trying to develop a toy that somebody should buy or use. Okay, all the shiny little toys are useless. I'm old school. Before there were computers, you know what? People actually solved problems and figured things out without toys. They built the pyramids using a long straw with water in it and a square. That was it. We flew to the moon with the computing power of a basic calculator without a square root sign on it. We need, some shiny toy that's going to...
Let's fly a drone in or something like that.
Well, what we need to do is if you know what the dead wood is, they don't want to cheat with a real person's registration. And the lefties know all the real people. You can Google us, you can, with $1 billion, with $100,000, you could get everybody's data. They know exactly how many people are voting, which way. Now, what happened in Muskegon County in 2020 is, one of the clerks, something was wrong. We can't count the vote. 10 days later, they count the vote and Trump loses by 510 votes. Now, if I was to speculate on the possibility of wrongdoing, I would speculate that someone could pick up the phone and say, hey, dude, I'm about 3,000 votes short here. I need 4,000 ballots. And since you have all these registrations and AV ballots at your disposal. Okay, so let's go back to the GBI story. GBI had two purposes. One, get voter registrations. Two, help educate voters. That's the part where the Michigan State Police investigation was shut down. They never got to investigate that part. Matter of fact, the local police know nothing about election. Okay, and the state police, they don't really know that. They're relying on the Secretary of State, but they know what it's a felony to put in a bad registration at minimum. But from the 2000 Mules movie, that ballot harvesting and stuffing illegal ballots was prevalent in a lot of states. And they have direct evidence of that. I don't care who. If you don't believe that, then you're not open to a rational discussion. Okay, so GBI got 12,500 registrations. And you know what they did? Once you get the registrations, I guarantee you, this is not in the police report, but I guarantee you what they did is they asked the person if they wanted to get an absentee ballot. If you want to do this right, you're going to ask. You better ask, or else you're not doing your job. So, and the person says, no, I don't want to do a registration. They say, well, it's all already filled out. Just sign it for me, please. So you can get them registered. And then you say, just sign this application. I got it already filled out. You sign it. I'm going to drop it in the mail for you and you'll get an absentee ballot. They say, I don't want to do an absentee ballot. Just please sign it for me. Now they happen to have hundreds of prepaid cards laying around. You know, the investigation never found out whether or not people were offered a prepaid card because they really only interviewed about 5 or 10 people that were in the report, even though there's 12,000 of these registrations. Why didn't they do more? Well, the investigation was cut off. Couldn't. But they did have iPads. You go out and get the registration on this thing, and then you take your iPad out later and you go and you talk to people about, I'm going to educate you on how to vote. I'm going to give you some input, show you what you need to do. Okay? And if I was running that operation, I would have said, did you get your AV ballot? I see that the clerk sent one out 2 days ago. And they had the person say, yeah, I got an AV. I don't care. I don't want to do this. He said, well, just give me the ballot. I'll take care of it for you. And here's a prepaid $25 card for your trouble. Okay. There is a photograph in Grand Rapids of a pickup truck outside of, I don't know if it was a homeless shelter or one of these kind of places with a sign in the front says $25 for your AV ballot. He was purchasing them from people. Okay. That's the only piece of information I have. But you know, from the 2000 Mules way, there's 100 ways to do this. If you have everybody's signature, you can fill out a ballot application. You got a scanner in your office, like GBI did. You can scan those things. You can put that signature on the bottom of or on an envelope of an AV ballot. You can vote that AV ballot. You can drop it into a Dropbox. So the capability, I'm not saying that they did it. I said they are fully capable of doing all of those things. Does the Secretary of State know that they're capable of doing all those things? She ought to. She's the Secretary of State. She's been doing election stuff for a long time. And if she doesn't know, she's a dumbass. And I don't think she is. I don't think she's dumb. She talks in a patronizing manner. Did you see the video of her answering questions from the person on X? She had a list of questions. Yeah. I was like, excuse me? Talking to me like I'm a 5th grader? Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Bye-bye. I'm taking care of it. It's just, I don't know how they think they can do that and have people not notice. You think we're all a bunch of dumb idiots running around drinking beer and watching Disney at night? Is that what you think the electorate is? I mean, it's infuriating. And especially when you find out all the other information going on underneath. You go change the Challenger rules. Okay, you got a 20-page document. And you change 5 spots in the Challenger rules. One of them I told you about. Very important change. Because if you can't challenge, then you can't go to a judge and say, hey, I got 52 ballots I challenged, and the election was 10 votes. And the law says that the judge has to force the clerk to go find those 52 people and see if they're eligible to vote. That's what the Challenger rules are all about. It's very important. It's probably the most important person in the election on election day. And the Secretary of State has gutted it and intimidated every person that wants to be a challenger. Now, you can have a lefty judge who's not going to do it for you. That's another whole problem. Voting for judges is not, it's so important. It's unbelievably important that good people run and we vote for them. And if people don't investigate who's going to be on the court, you are going to have decades of problems in your state and community as a result. Okay, so she makes 5 changes in the Challenger rules. Somebody challenges it. The court says, this document's illegal. It doesn't comply with the law. Change it. She writes 400 plus pages of legal brief to try to get out of this. 400 pages. How much time does it take and how many lawyers do you need to write 400 pages to defend 5 paragraphs in your 20-page document? Okay? And she loses. and then the Supreme Court says, I think she might have lost. I can't remember if she lost in the Supreme Court too. I think they turned it around. Okay, but nothing happened. Nobody's following up on it. Is it not important? Yes, it's important. It's the one way that a citizen can overturn an election. The one way. With all the changes they've made in Prop 2, you can still overturn an election by showing that there's that many bad ballots. The only way you can do that is if you canvass the QVF, knock on the doors, and EF ordered this out. I've got a list of 10,000 people to do in Muskegon County alone. I've got 2 or 3 people that are willing to do stuff. I need 50. I can get it all done in a year or two. If I had 20 people that would put in a few hours a week or a few hours a month, I could probably do it in 3 years or 4 years. What are we waiting for? Got to get it done. You want to fix this problem? This is the way you fix it. You canvass the QVF. You find out which ones are funky. You go out, you knock the doors. You put together a naughty list, I call it. And when the AV ballots come out, you compare the naughty list against the AV ballots, and you know how many of them are cheats. And you challenge them. Now, we've been trying to be nice by sending these lists to the clerks. And the clerks in the smaller counties are very willing to check into things and do things. And a lot of times they find they're real people. And we're happy about that. I don't care who wins the election as an election worker. I really don't. But I want to know that the election is trustworthy. I want to know that the people in government are transparent. If I can see the data and everything's good and everybody's doing their job, I'm happy. It doesn't matter who wins to me, because that's what the people chose. This is a system of personal sovereignty. If you don't want to vote, okay, I wish you would. If you do vote, I respect your vote. I don't care who you vote for. It's kind of problematic if you're voting for a dumbass or a person that's not qualified, but that's your right to do that. You want to destroy everything. But to not have any transparency, to not be able to get the data from your elected officials, the data is so screwed up, it's unbelievable. I go on and on, but it's a playground out there, and we can't get any real answers. Can't get any real answers, and it's just getting worse and worse. So I expect that they're going to cheat their asses off this next election. And we need an overwhelming number of people to go out and vote. We need people to volunteer to be challengers. If nothing else, to be standing there to make sure that they don't pull out a pile of something out of the back room, or that they don't run the ballots through 2 or 3 times like they did at the TCF Center. So a truck doesn't pull up in the back and they bring in boxes of ballots. I mean, you don't even have to do anything but be standing there, because just by standing there, they change the people that are functioning the elections. And we have a lot of good people over in this county doing it. And we got wonderful election workers. They're great people. There's some of them have been doing it for years and years and years. And the clerks are wonderful. Most of them are very straightforward and honest. But there's all these phony registrations. And the Secretary of State won't even acknowledge in anything. If you look at anything she says, she always assumes that every registration is a real person. But you can't have 8 million registrations in a state where there's only 6.5 million real voters. Okay? You're not doing your job, as far as I'm concerned.
Shouldn't that be brought up, and shouldn't there be like a lawsuit, just attacking that one issue?
Yeah, I think some people have tried to do that recently. I'm not sure where EIF is. We can't get any money for lawsuits. Nobody will give us money.
Do you know any good lawyers that are honest, that have been intimidated?
Well, there's only 2 or 3 lawyers that have been willing to stick their necks out that I know. And we've asked other lawyers to do things. They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. They'll do the easy stuff, the non-controversial stuff.
which lawyers were willing to do stuff?
Well, Stephanie Lambert is the primary one, and they've thrown her in jail already once, and they're going after her. And then you got Dan Hartman, who was the lawyer for the MIGOP. I think he had been willing to do some things. If you go to the MFE calls, lawyers all the time from outside the state, the Thomas, Thomas Foundation or whatever. I mean, we have to get lawyers from outside the state because I don't know if there's any other lawyers in the state. I mean, DePerno's tried to do some things right, and they're whacking him around like a ping pong ball. I'm not sure if he's doing anything more, but I don't know where he. You need to. I told people you need to have some lawsuits based on like my challenger rights being violated. I mean, we need to charge somebody with a felony for that. And that would send a message throughout the whole state. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody cares to take that up. All the lawsuits are these big dramatic things against the Secretary of State. And she loses in the courts, even though we got one person, Stephanie, and I think that there might be one or two more. Okay, so I'm not tied into that. I don't go to the meetings where lawyers are there talking about all the stuff they're going to do, and they keep getting funding from everybody and nothing ever happens. The guys from outside of the state, I mean, I'm the wrong guy to talk to about legal stuff. But it's been 4 years. What got accomplished through the legal system? The Secretary of State's lost 5-6 times already. She doesn't change anything. We don't have the time or the money or find the lawyers to be able to go back and follow it up. And people sit at home saying, oh, I can't do anything. I mean, we need funding. EIF needs funding. But we would probably sue. We could do a whole bunch of suits. We know all kinds of things that are wrong. I mean, Scott Ogney has been trying to do this locus standi thing. Can't you get a clerk because they're not keeping the data right? I mean, the law says they have to keep the data, right? They don't keep the data. They don't keep the data. They're sending us crap for reports. They're in there mucking it up, changing things all. Charlevoix County, their census said they gained 100 people in 10 years.
What?
100 people in the county average. But how many people were added to their registration in the last 3 years? Over 2,000. So I was up there giving talks with Dr. Franks, and they said, where should we look? Dr. Franks says, look at all the new stuff coming in your file. And, if you do the census stuff, you realize 2,000 is too many. Who are these 2,000 people? I don't know. Did 2,000 people move out? Another 2,000 moved in? It's possible, I suppose. Those are the doors you ought to knock. I mean, if you look month after month, you can tell some people are always in the file. Those are probably the standard people. And the ones that are coming and going since at least 2019 are probably good fodder to go knock on the door and see if they're real. So
do you have a bullet? Do you have a bullet pointed list of all of this stuff? That people could see at a glance.
Well, if you look at the recommendations on the top of this report, most of those are still valid. The more recent ones, no, I don't. But I like to go and give talks. I've given some talks in Macomb and Oakland and Muskegon and Charlevoix. And I would do more of those. But, my firm belief is that people have to be involved in this. And EIF has a structure to be able to do this across the entire state. And they have the tools to be able to work out. Every county right now has a reporting log at EIF. And we can tell you how many people are over 110 years old in your county. Well, on the registration list, how many people have extensions? They should have an apartment extension, but they don't. So that registration is invalid because you can't send them a piece of mail. There is no address. We have a list of all the people that have, in the last 5 years, have posted a permanent change of address. So and this is not an exhaustive list. There's people that have been on the files for 10, 15 years that are not real, and somebody keeps voting them to keep them on the list, or they've been taken off and they get put back on or shuffled around. Okay, I'll give you one more piece of data here. Stuff is popping into my head. I asked in 22, I went to the county clerk. I sent in a FOIA request. I said, give me a list of all the people with their addresses who actually vote in the election. Pretty easy, right? It's just data. Clerk should have that, right? It's like a list of people that got married, or right? It's not that hard. So it took them 86 days to respond to my FOIA. And the only reason they responded is because I called them up. They said, hey, did you see that FOIA that I sent you? They're like, what? There's a FOIA? It's like they had an email box and nobody checks it. Okay, so the person was new at their job. They sent me the list. I said, I'm sorry, but I called them back. It's short. The county clerk said there were 96,000 plus people that voted in the 2020 election. Not everybody votes in every race, right? There were only 92,000 people that voted for president, but there were 96,000 people that voted. Some people don't vote the top of the ticket. They only vote the locals or vice versa. So they sent me 90,500. I was like, that's not even close. Okay, you're not even close. So she said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm new at the job here. I've been here 3 weeks. She was a jurisdictional clerk before this. She said, I'll try again. Sends me a list. It's about 200 different. I said, come on. I'm looking for 96,000 voters. She sends me the third time, and it's within about 200 of the other two. Okay, so I have 90,000 people in the current history as of the middle of 22 that voted in 2020. Okay, that means it's not accurate. The history is not accurate. They're relying on the Secretary of State to keep their history. And I told this election supervisor, I said, look, at next election, you need to download the certified results after the election is over and save it offline, because people are mucking around with your results and you're responsible for keeping them. Okay? And she was like, okay. So county clerk wouldn't give me an answer. So I filed a report with the sheriff. And I said, look, I've asked for this data 3 times. I'm not getting it. I think it's a violation of law that there isn't enough stuff. I want to know what happened. He didn't really jump on this thing right away. Did a face-to-face interview. I haven't gotten a report from him. I have to ask for the report, I guess. They're not sending me any results. But the answer was that some people from outside the county voted in school-related elections because they have kids in school inside the county. Okay, that is not an adequate answer, because what I asked for was how many people and where do they live voted in the 2020. If they're outside the county, put their name on the list. How hard is that?
Is that Sheriff Poland that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sheriff Poland is a great guy. I like him. He's very friendly, forthcoming. He's a good listener. He admitted to me he has no idea what election law is about, and he has no resources to do anything on a computer. So I told my Republican friends, okay, now I'm not EIF, now I'm over here. I said, you should go into the county commission meetings and you should increase the budget for 2 departments. One is the county sheriff, because he doesn't have enough people, and 2 is the clerk. Have their roles clean and keep track of their data. And I fully support that as a conservative who wants to have limited government and small taxes. You're going to spend money, you need to spend it where it's important. Our sheriff, I asked my sheriff directly, what are you going to do if there's a school shooting out in Montague or in Twin Lake? How much time is it going to take you to respond to that? Do you have an emergency preparedness plan for that kind of a disaster? He says, no. He doesn't. I said, why? So there was this was a year or so ago. I said, why? school shooting over here. The only difference between one kid getting killed and about 50 being killed is how fast a guy with a gun can show up at the school. And if you can't show up within 3 minutes, then you need a plan. And if he says, well, I don't have a lot of deputies. We have a shortage of county sheriff deputies anyway. And I said, you need more deputies then. I'll vote for that. I'll give you, how many do you need? Let's do it. It's just a matter of time before something happens and we need them. We can't afford to be short. Okay, so anyway, 6,000 names missing roughly off of that list. Did you remember the 6,000 I mentioned a long time ago?
Yeah.
At the beginning of our talk?
Yeah.
Somehow, the Secretary of State eliminated 6,000 people who had voted off of our records in the first quarter of 21. Well, were those the same 6,000? Now I need volunteers to help me figure that out. Okay, so we are the cavalry. You want your government back? You need to get off your couch, change your calendar, and stop doing some of these other things you're doing. And all you need is vote a little bit of time. A lot of people with a little bit of time, we can solve this. It might take 2 or 3 years. Doesn't matter. Once you start seeing the magnitude of the problem, more and more people will be interested. And eventually you get people out there and you'll vote the scoundrels out. And somebody with some integrity and a reasonable worldview can get voted in to do a good job. Until then, people are going to be moving out of the state.
Moving out of the state and also being disenfranchised by the processes, which are completely and totally broken down. I mean, you don't have to be like the sharpest person to get this thing figured out. That the cheating is so bad. And they can't sit there and say, I don't know, like Nessel did. I don't know. I passed it to the state police, and that was them. They know.
She's lying. I'm going to say right out front, she's lying like a rug. And so is Benson.
They're all
They know
lying.
exactly how many faulty registrations there were. I want them to tell us how many were illegal. And why haven't you prosecuted the people that did them? There was an opinion of the people that were hired to do this. They were paid money. They weren't like real people that had normal jobs all the time. They're people that constantly are losing their jobs, and they got one of these jobs and they did it, and they had a lot of turnover. And the excuse was, well, we don't want to prosecute a person that's down on their luck and they don't have very much income. They broke the freaking law. It's a felony. You're going to do this again this year? You have another felony? What about GBI Strategies? They're not registered in the state as a business. What about all the tax money from, spending $1 million inside the state or $1.5 million, et cetera, et cetera? You're going to let these people do this again? You're not. Does the law mean anything? Apparently not if you don't worry about the outcome. If you had somebody else in that position, like Carrie Lake or whatever, you think she'd do something different? Probably. And she'd try to follow the law. But the investigation's held up with the FBI, and that's her excuse. Why doesn't she file charges against the state laws that were broken? That's not the FBI's responsibility to charge for state law. The FBI should be charging because GBI came across state lines and they moved money across state lines and it wasn't taxed, and they had guns. By the way, every person in this investigation every officer that investigated had their name written in the report except for one, the supposed ATF agent that went and looked at those guns. So, hold on a second. I have to get a bat.
I love live broadcasts because it's unpredictable, but yet it's real. And I think that I feel really strongly about this, that we really need to continue having having live broadcasts and bringing people on to tell their sides of the story, because that's how we really get to the truth. I think I have so many questions right now watching Chris. I didn't want to interrupt him because where he is right now, he doesn't have a great connection, and I didn't want to muck that up by interrupting him as he was talking or asking questions. But I have so many questions, Chris, that came out of this discussion that I really think I want to like ponder some of this. But going back to I'm going to bring you back to the ATF agent that came in there, who shall not be named, and all the craziness around the firearms, open firearms that they had with stuff. And I think that, you said it too, that what was scratched on the board, the whiteboard next to it. Tell everybody what was scratched on that whiteboard, and the situations with the guns that were on, and these are the same people that are writing the laws to try to get rid of our ability to lawfully own guns. Same people. And that are backing the gun control laws.
Right. So there's a bunch of disinformation that was put out by whoever's claiming that they're reporting on this. I won't say who, you can figure it out. There was a gun case in the Southfield office. This is in the police report. I think the police report might be accessible through the GBI Strategies. The Gateway Pundit article. I'm not sure, but I have a copy of it. And there was a gun case there. It had military grade rifles in it, more than one, and specialized pistols with sights, not your average 45s or whatever. They weren't pea shooters. And this case was open in the room where all these people are coming and going, doing this registration drive. And it wasn't locked up. Recently they passed the law that all your guns have to be locked up, so your kids don't get them, or someone in your house doesn't get them. Well, who owned those guns? And why was it open? On the whiteboard, it said something about discuss taking guns into the field, or something to that effect. Like they're going to talk about whether or not they needed to have a gun in the field. I mean, if you bring a gun in a vehicle, I know this for myself, you're supposed to have it locked up in a box in the trunk. Okay? If you bring a gun into a van, because in Muskegon, they rented 4 or 5 vans. They put 6 people in each van, and they drove around, let the people off, go door to door, and they picked them back up and they brought them back. And they worked for, 6-7 hours a day. And they're talking about whether or not they should bring a gun out into the field. Why you would need a military grade rifle with a banana clip on it is beyond me. Now, the report says that the ATF agent came, unnamed ATF agent came, and tested the weapons to see if they were automatic or not, because these were military grade weapons. And they claimed that they weren't. But the problem was that there was some information put out by somebody who said that the owner of these guns was the person renting the office out to GBI. Now, if you're renting an office out to a bunch of people, you got a bunch of low-wage workers wandering in and out of this thing all day long. Why would you leave your gun case open with ammo and guns that are not secured? Seems to me that's a bad idea. Okay, and for all those gun people out there on the left that think there's going to be shooting, you don't let 25 people wander around with an open gun case. Okay, if you don't have somebody there responsible for it. Turns out that the guns were owned by Gary Bell. I believe that's what the report says. Gary Bell owned the guns. He left them in the office, and he was in Iowa at the time. He brought the guns, left the guns open, and left the state, and left them in the care of whoever that was running that office or whatever. I don't even know that. Was that followed up on? Is that a crime? Maybe not. It's not very wise. Was there a Democrat anywhere who said anything about it? No. Did Nessel say anything about it? Not until it came out in the open. And they whitewashed that one right down the street. And then later they passed a law saying you have to have your guns all locked up in your house, but you can leave them open out in the place where there's just random people walking around. Okay, so you can fill in some gaps there. If I keep going, I'll get myself in trouble.
Yeah, keep
But,
going. I think
yeah,
this is really interesting.
These guys,
because
they're worried about children getting worried about, they believe that a gun is somehow an active participant in killing people. No, you and I know that a gun is a good thing when it's used by a good person. It's a bad thing when it's used by a bad person. Actually, a gun is never good or bad. A gun is just a gun. When it's used badly, it's the person's responsibility. Personal sovereignty, right? You want to own a gun? You own the responsibility of caring for that gun and who uses it and what happens with it, right? That's the personal responsibility thing. And all of us conservatives know that. You need to take care of your guns and use them responsibly. And but they weren't responsible with these guns. Fortunately, nothing happened as a result of that. But no guns were found in Muskegon. I think it was only in the Southfield office. That was the main office for the activity in the state.
wasn't there
So we're
some
not sure
found
if
out
they
by
could have been
Flint?
transported.
I think there was some found out by Flint, wasn't there?
I think it was Southfield was their office. Is that near
Okay.
Flint?
Not
But
not
there were
very
6 different communities where they were doing these kind of activities. You know, so there was somewhere between 12 to 25 people in each office times 6. So, you know, there was 150 people or so involved in these activities across the state. And nothing, no one, the investigation wasn't allowed to go to completion in the state. I don't care if the FBI got stuff or not. They should have continued the investigation to finish it. But according to Benson, the election was fine. Nothing happened. There was no fraud. Okay. Well, I'll believe that when she tells me how many of those 12,500 registrations, or even what the total number was, and how many got into the system, and how many that got into the system weren't really good and they pulled them out. Did they do an investigation? I know for certain, and I know the name of the analyst who worked on them in the Secretary of State's office. They delivered all of these to the Secretary of State and they had them analyzed by their analyst. Secretary of State knows exactly how many there are. And she acts as if she's not even close to the investigation. I haven't heard all the news reports, but Nessel comes out and says some lawyer ease. I mean, I'm an engineer. I can tell when somebody's trying to schmooze me. And Nessel did not answer any questions. She made it more blurry than it was before. Certainly more blurry than the investigative report. So, you know, the elections are not safe in the state. We don't know how much hanky-panky is going on in the background. But I guarantee you, whoever's putting all these expired registrations in it is responsible. And somebody is either putting them up to it or just allowing them to do it and allowing to have plausible deniability. But, you know, you can see from my climate change hockey stick chart from hell that somebody's playing around in the system. And I'm thinking of writing another report. You get the, you know, you can go on the Secretary of State's website and get the data, and then go to your own county clerk and find out what the actual number was at the election. And I bet you in 22, you have a similar bump. But this election, if I know what they're capable of, there's going to be a massive bump again. I haven't even checked it recently, but so anyway, I'll stay on for a little bit longer. I'll let you talk. I've been talking constantly.
Well, I
this
really
whole
just wanted to
time.
hear what you had to say today, Chris, and honestly, I'd love to have you come back again and go over some of this again, because there's so many details here. And as you said, we've got to get people working on this. We can't just sit back, because it's not just going to magically fix itself, because the people that have rigged this in the first place rigged it to hide things and stay in power. The goal is for them to continue to stay in power and grab more power and more power until we the people are irrelevant. That's what Marxists have done for who knows how long. This has been going on. This has been going on for a very, very long time. This is and it probably didn't start with Marx. I don't believe that it really did, even though he's got the title for it. This has been going on for a very long time. And I think that this is fascinating. And what I really like about the way that you present it is that you bring the receipts. You don't just talk about it and make opinions and conjecture. You actually bring the receipts and prove out what you're seeing. I think that I'd like to ponder everything you've said here, but it is very clear to me that we have no one in the seats right now that actually is working to do the will of the people and function as they should as public functionaries within on the rails, a job description, making sure that they're doing the right thing and helping to hold this country together and to the foundation that we had from the beginning of this nation. They have no interest in doing it. To see the amount of covering up, lack of transparency, the nonsense with this graph over here is just, really, I've seen it before, but to really, for everybody to see this in front of them, you can't come to any other conclusion than they're cheating their ever-living behinds off on this. They're continuing to do it. I wish there were more people coming forward with the intimidation. I just filed a pro se case about a month ago. And I'm sure I've gotten lots of things wrong because I'm not an attorney, but you know what? We've got to be able to dive in and do what we can and figure it out as we go. If we make mistakes, that's okay. Keep making mistakes, but we've got to continue to go forward. So I guess I would really like to ask everybody out there to please, give Chris a call. Do you have a way that they can get a hold of you, or do you want them to go through EIF? I love EIF. I love Joanne, and I love Sandy, and there's so many good people, and I know people have switched out roles there a little bit, but I think we should really call people out who have actually been working on this that have not gotten any credit whatsoever. And Sandy and Joanne certainly have done some amazing work, and in yourself, and there's others there too that we can really be thankful for.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, they don't want any credit. They're very quiet and unassuming. Joanne does a tremendous amount of work and has really brought so much data and led the data team for a long time. Right now, she's doing work with EIF and other places too. And, if we had funding, we could knock the socks off of this thing. And there's a lot of things that we'd like to do that do cost money, and that's outside of, of suing people. We have 4 or 5 suits we could do right now. The data itself, if we could pay people to canvas, we could get this done really quick. If we had resources for some of the computer things that we want to do, database related things, that would be wonderful. We do have some money, a little bit of money. The America Project supports us. Shout out to Jason Ikes, who's tremendous.
I was just going to mention him too. Jason Ikes is amazing, and I'm so thankful to know him. He truly is an incredible patriot, and he's very smart and professional.
And he's not looking for credit. He wants to get things done. And if he can't get something done, he's not going to worry or stress over it or complain about it. He focuses on what he can get accomplished, and he stays in that lane. And I'll tell you, one of the problems with Michigan, one of the great things about people in Michigan, and one of the bad things about Michigan, is that people are too nice. Most of the people that have volunteered for this kind of work, they're Christians, most of them, not all of them. Some people are not even conservatives. I've got some people that vote independent and Republican, they're not interested in Donald Trump at all. They don't care about that. But they know if the elections are bad, then it's bad for everybody, for the independent candidates and for anybody. I would vote for a Democrat if they would have responsible behavior toward their budgets and have reasons for why they do things. That would be fine. I would vote for him. And I'm a really strong conservative pro-life person. Okay, so we need people that have principles, that are willing to do the right thing, that are willing to not only obey the law, but actually do things that are moral, and ethical. And, like I said, that when I first came in to election stuff, I asked the Muskegon GOP, we bounced all the moderate Republicans who were really doing nothing for years. They did some things, but they really weren't actively trying to fix elections or get people in to be poll inspectors or committee to figure this out because there's something wrong. And they wanted me to sue somebody within the first 6 months. And I said, I can't do that. What am I going to sue them for? I'm going to sue the county clerk for what? She doesn't know anything. She doesn't even understand election law. She's kind of a figurehead. She's a clerk, but elections, she, delegates it down to people that are functionally running the election, and she doesn't know about data. She doesn't know how to keep her data. She doesn't understand her computer system. The Secretary of State does not train clerks. What they do with the Board of Elections is they tell clerks what they can and can't do. And a lot of times that's not in concordance with the law. They tell them what they want them to do. And it's not always with the law, but the clerks are like, okay, whatever you want me to do. We had a clerk in Roosevelt Park say that she is not responsible for cleaning her file. She wants no part of it. And I think that's because they were leaning on her and all the other clerks and saying, you're not doing this. And they're pulling the responsibility away from the jurisdictional clerks up to the Secretary of State. And every law and regulation they're writing is making it easier and easier to cheat. I'm not saying that they're cheating, but it's making it easier and easier. And then they have plausible deniability because they have people from all over just dumping tens of thousands, millions of registrations in and out of the file. It's like Grand Central Station. It's like being on the highway at rush hour. There are and Pat Kolbeck says it's there to cause confusion. You put in 10,000, you use 2,000 of them to vote, you take them all out again. How are you going to find that? We find it. We're looking for it. If you spend enough time, you had some money, and you had some full-time programmers, you could find a lot more. But nobody wants to give us any money. They're giving it to the people with the shiny penny. Oh, look at my little program I can do. Okay, well, some of those do some good. I'm not saying that they're bad necessarily, but they're taking money, finding money, doing stuff that's not really solving the problem. If everyone in the entire state wanted to take one shiny penny that I know about and do their thing, and they were honestly wanting to get rid of all the bad voters registrations out there, it might be effective. How many Democrats want to use a shiny penny from the Republicans or from some guy who appears to be conservative? They're not even going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. Okay. And so we need volunteers. We need people willing to run for office that are committed to it. We need small businesses who are conservative to be willing to donate to a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. But a lot of businesses don't want to give money because if the lefties find out that they're doing it, they could lose their sales or their businesses. So that's more intimidation. How many things do the Marxists have to do before we decide it's too much? And it's just like the Patriots in the Revolutionary War or the people in Germany, or you just pick any place, at a certain point, you got to decide if you've had enough. And how much do you want to fall into more and more slavery before you actually do something? It's just going to get harder, right, to get out
I
of it.
think
Michigan can get out of its problems if it wanted to. It might take 5 years. It might take 10. They've been working on it for 30. And in the last 10 or 15, since computer technology has grown so much, they've been working overtime.
Yeah.
Dominion or whatever. One thing's for certain, the database that the Secretary of State is operating, and I've talked to a couple people about this, it wasn't really designed really well in the first place. So it's got some problems. I understand that. Okay. It's got problems. Somebody ought to torch the damn thing because it's not keeping the records properly. But that all being said, you can make anything work if you work at it. And we are not getting proper information by design. I mean, when a person moves, say from Muskegon County to Macomb County, you know what happens? The Secretary of State reports the history of their voting in Macomb County. Now, the database doesn't flag their vote as a Muskegon County vote. So if I go back 5 years or 2 years after somebody's moved and they got a new registration, the vote counts will change because the vote from Muskegon got moved with the person over to the other place. How does that make any sense whatsoever? That's insanity. This is a database. Are you a clerk? You got one job. One job as a clerk, keep the data, right? And all the county clerks are like, oh, I don't need to do anything now because the Secretary of State is keeping my data. No,
well,
they're
they
not.
told them
They're
not
keeping
to.
your data.
There's a letter out there that came from the state that told the clerks not to keep the data and pass it on, because I had that in our township, in Byron Township. So they're being instructed by the state to break the law.
Right. And this
That's what
is
I'm
one of the things
saying.
that got Stephanie Scott into problems, right? Or who was the other person? They actually,
Stephanie
in
Lambert
Arizona,
and Stephanie Scott. You
they
call them
they
out.
covered their stuff. Well, they took their data offline before they had the maintenance person come in and screw with their system, and they got penalized for it. She was trying to preserve her data because she didn't know what this guy's doing. Going to come in and update the system. I was a challenger in the middle of the AV count, and I think it was in 22. And I'm sitting there watching these things, and all of a sudden I see this dude I haven't seen before standing with the clerk, or the person running the AV counting board. And I said, hi, who are you? I said, oh, I'm the technician from the ES&S, or the local, vendors who are keeping the equipment in Muskegon County. And what's going on? Oh, the machine blacked out. I had to do an upgrade to the software right in the middle of the count. We're counting on the $100,000 machine. This is the $100,000 machine. They did an upgrade right there. They bumped it to 2.1 or 2.2. They bumped it up a little thing. Something was a little kind of fishy, and the machine shut down. They had to reboot it with the new software. Well, what happened to the tally? I don't know. Did it change anything?
God.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But you want to tell somebody about this? I mean, why is your $100,000 machine shutting down on you in the middle of a count? That just it's bad. Why did you spend $100,000 on a machine? You do a hand count. EIF has learned from the woman Mans or whatever down in Oklahoma how to do hand counts. We're willing to train anybody across the state to do a hand count.
Is that Linda Rance?
And so it says I think so, yeah. So it says in the old manual on how to run an election that you as a local clerk has the power to be able to do a hand count if you think there's something hinky going on with your machine and you might have a problem. Just to double check. It doesn't. I think it gives you a little bit of direction on how to do a hand count, but they figure that you're a clerk, you should know how to do a hand count, right? So we're volunteering to anybody that wants. We'll train you There's a way 4 people sit around a table. It's 100% accurate. It happens really quick. And we'll do that for any clerk or any group out there that wants to be able to do that. But, they say it's more expensive to hand count. No. How much, if you had to pay somebody $20 an hour and you had 4 people sitting around, how many hours is that before you get to $100,000? Okay. What's the cost of the early voting in this state? Okay. 2 people come in for early voting and you have it out there for 9 days, and you have a separate, and you have all that tech and all the technicians setting things up. Okay. So, I could keep going on, but it's going to take a clerk that's got some principles and that understands the law. And apparently this Secretary of State is not teaching people the law. They're just telling, this is the way I want you to function. Is there any signature verification procedure out there? They certainly don't have a digital verification procedure. They barely have one. I think that they train people. Has anybody ever been trained on how to verify a signature? How many signatures are rejected? Don't even know. Can I get a challenger in to sit there and watch signature verification? I should be able to. Legally, challengers should be able to watch any election process. And since they changed the rules in the challenger thing, they better let me in to watch the signature verification, because they claim that there's some mysterious process whereby they prove the eligibility of a voter. I don't know what that is, but I have to be there to challenge the vote. Awful.
I tell you what, Chris, none of us could run a company the way that they run this state. No. Least of all our elections. No. Not least of all the elections.
You'll all get fired.
The incredible incompetence, negligence, or just egregious malfeasance and fraud. I mean, you could throw every name at it that you wanted, and you're probably going to be correct on it. But I think that somebody better get in there and start launching. What's that?
Yeah.
Start firing them.
But see, they have plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Well, they have plausible deniability because it's really the person running the ship who's ultimately responsible. So it's the Secretary of State. She needs to put in training and database improvements and guidance for the local clerks to do their job. I think the local clerks, by and large, are all doing as good a job as they know how. And they're getting direct. They have gotten so much direction in the last 2 years on challengers and cleaning the rolls. They basically have been told not to clean the rolls, that we, EIF and third parties, have no right to clean things or suggest to clean. It's kind of amazing, right? So if you're a clerk and you're doing your responsibility, if some guy sends you a list and says, I think these people need to be checked, okay, you might not be able to get to it right away. You might have to do it after the election. I'm fine with that. And they got limited resources. But not to do it, and to be told not to do it, and then to be given all kinds of reasons why they can't do it, is clear indication that the Secretary of State does not want to follow the spirit of the law, at least. But everybody has plausible deniability. And until the Secretary of State straightens her act out, I'm not going to point my finger at the local clerk. Although I wish the clerk in the city of Muskegon would come forward and tell us what she knows. There's nothing secret about what she did. Whatever she did is fine. She got a bunch of stuff and somebody said, hey, this ain't right. She turned it in. She's doing fine. Nobody's going to yell at her for that. Matter of fact, there's people in patriot organizations that think she's a hero. Personally, you better watch out when you say that, because I think there are people in her office that are principled and believe in the law. And I think because of those people is why she turned it in. I'm not completely convinced that Ann turned it in on her own, or that she was the first person to have that idea. So if she did, that's great. I applaud her. I think she's a nice person. I like her. I've talked with her a number of different times. But she's told what to do. The Bureau of Elections owns every clerk in this state right now. It is a top-down bully system that is not necessarily all comporting with the law. And the Board of Elections, every time the EIF has tried to challenge or put out lists for challengers, they change the rules. They don't give us the rules. Could you send us the rules? We're a 501(c), 504, whatever. We're a nonpartisan volunteer like an NGO. If you're changing the rules because something we asked for, send us the rules. No. If I have 1,000 people to challenge, I have to put every name on a separate piece of paper, and now I got to have some kind of an affidavit with it, and I got to live in the. Meanwhile, you're up at the state level, and you're allowing people outside the state to monkey with our QVF and put in.
Okay, video went flaky again here, Chris. It'll come back in a minute. I hope. This is a mountain of evidence that Chris is bringing forward here. It's just amazing. And I think that we need to continue to talk to Chris. I'll probably bring Chris back on again. And I think there's more details we need to go through. So let's see if he comes back on again. If not, then I'm going to go ahead and end the show then. And we'll have Chris back on at a later. Yep. Let's see if he jumps back in. If we might have Chris come back on at a later time too, so that we can go over this data more thoroughly and look at the points that we have, and also answer some questions. I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of questions about what actually happened. And it's very convoluted. I'd almost like to see like a timeline written out. Maybe I'll do that, is put together a timeline on this. Maybe Chris will help with that. And then if we could attack this a little bit in a lawful way. It sounds like we do have some friends in the court system that are willing to actually prosecute things. I don't have a lot of faith in the decisions of the Supreme Court. If they in fact took a donation, one of the Supreme Court justices, to his PAC, and all of a sudden the decision went in a different direction. Oh, here comes Chris. Lost you there for a minute, Chris. Yeah, I think we're having some spotty outages. Last night and today I've been watching the outages on the down detector and some. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd like to have you come back in on again someday. Can you come back another time and we can go through some more stuff?
Yeah, I'd love to.
This is such a pleasure, Chris, and I just really thank you for coming on today. Would you like to say a prayer to end the broadcast today, or would you like me to?
Okay, that'd be great.
Would you or me? Go ahead if you'd like.
Okay. Well, why don't you go first? I think my internet's still going in and out, but tell me what you'd like me to review before we shut down here.
Well, I tell you what, you can say whatever you want. You say whatever you want, then I'll say a prayer, and then we'll end the broadcast. How's that?
Okay, that'd be good. So what I was saying when I lost the feed here is that, we need to have the Secretary of State do something that's rational and consistent and give us good data, because we're the residents of this state, and we need to have the data to be able to see what's going on and be able to assure people around. The reason we're doing this is so we can assure people that elections are transparent. Them. That's what EIF is about. We don't care who wins. I personally care who wins, but as EIF, I don't care who wins. I will prosecute the election, and I'll call out Republicans if they're cheating, as some of us believe that they are. It's part of the reason why we're not getting money. And we see other things. Secretary of State is obviously a political hack who's got one agenda in life. It's very obvious. Just do the right thing. Follow the law. You want to change the laws? Okay, we'll have to deal with that. We'll do the thing that we got to do. People need to tighten up the election so that we can trust the results. Right now, you cannot trust the results unless you can see the data. In this last QVF, they won't give us any data because they know that we can analyze for it going into the election. And they want to be able to certify before we find it. And then they think everything's fine. No, it's not fine. We'll analyze the data after the election, but it's not over just because it's done. So, we're not going away. If they come after us, then it proves that they're not just partisan, but, this is the way Marxists act. I don't have to call them Marxists, but they're acting like they want to run everything and that they're going to control the outcome. It's not appropriate. They're supposed to keep the data. Clerk should do her job, keep the data, make it transparent, fix her broken system. Her database is trash, and her allowing the outside people from outside the state. These people have full access to the QVF. That means they have your driver's license number, your date of birth, and who are these people at Eric? And how do we know that they're not sharing our information with somebody else? We don't. Are there any guardrails on these people? If they're going to do it, why aren't they sitting in the Secretary of State's office doing it there with her software? That would be fine. Who's keeping track of what's coming in and going out of the system? Where are all these names coming from? Why is the history moving? Why can't I get a list of everybody who election a year later? Okay, there's 100 questions, no satisfactory answers, and everything that comes out just makes it more difficult for nonpartisan or partisan groups to be able to see what's happening and to try to make their followers feel comfortable that, hey, our guy lost, but look, it was good. That's what we want. If our guy loses, that's fine. But we can say, no, this thing's tight as a drum. There's no possible way somebody cheated. That's where we're going to. That's where we want to get to. And it's up to the citizens, of this state to be able to do it. The ones that have some money, man, we could use it because that's what our goal is. Be able to tell people whether we win or lose, hey, it was okay. But when you lose by a whisker and you got a hole the size of a truck in the side of the room, letting all the beasties in and stuff, you got no control, that's not a good feeling. And that means that people can't sit home and say, oh, it's broken, so I'm not going to vote. No, that means you need to go out and vote. You need to get all your friends to go out and vote because the more votes there are, the more possibly can win. You stay home, then you're letting the Marxists win. Okay, you want to give up, you will be in chains. You want to be lazy, you're going to be in chains. They're going to raise your taxes. They're going to increase the regulations all around you. They're going to build things next to you and control the puddle in your backyard. Okay, so you want that to happen? Okay, be lazy. I don't want that to happen to me. We're supposed to be free, sovereign people. But in order, we have to have people in office that believe that they can trust the people in their state to do what's right for their families and their communities and not tell us what to do. My body, my choice? Yeah, I believe in one vote per one real person. Okay, that's good all day long.
That's
but
good
all
all
the
day
votes
long.
that are out there for non-real people are a problem. So
large problem. Well, thank you so much, Chris. We're going to have Chris back on again because this was really fun today. I'm going to say a prayer to finish out the broadcast, and then once again, I really appreciate everything that you bring forward and all your research and the hard work that you've done in the EIF and everybody that we just love so much there, and the work that you guys do that just unsung heroes.
Lots
I
of people
appreciate
at EIF. A lot of people behind all that work, and I'm not the only one. So I appreciate all the guys and women that are doing things and that have no need for, any kind of recognition, but they're doing the most important work that can be done. So
those are my favorite kind of people, really. Those are the fun people to talk to, because they are doing it because it's in their heart, and their heart is
Right.
for this nation and to do the right thing before God, which is what we're going to do right now. Thank you, Heavenly Father, so much for this opportunity to bring forward this information and help educate everybody on what's actually going on here. I ask that you would send a mighty move of your spirit out there to move people to get involved, to help us in this fight for this nation in a meaningful way, to hold people accountable and ensure that everyone has their rights given by God upheld, defended by the Constitution, as well as the rule of law in this nation. You've given us a wonderful, wonderful gift. The United States is a wonderful, wonderful gift that was given to us, and we are thankful for every single thing you've done for us. We ask that you would guide us through this time, that you would show us what we need to do to follow you, and to always realize and revere you as our Heavenly Father, our provider, our guide, and the one that we need to turn to first in all things, asking you what you want done in the work of your kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. We thank you so very much for this day. I ask your favor to be mightily upon Chris and everyone who stands with them, that you would bless them with your favor, as well as other people to come alongside of them and help them. We are so thankful for each and every person out there, and ask that you would speak directly to their heart today with healing, with calm, with a sense of calmness that passes understanding, and the love of Christ that we all so desperately love, and that we just adore you so much. And we're thankful that you care about us enough to send your only begotten Son to pay the penalty for all the things that we've done that are wrong. And we all know we've done wrong things, and we thank you for that gift of salvation. Thank you so much for this day. Guide us as we go along our way. You've been a great friend to us, and we want to be a friend to you. We love you. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, thank you so much, Chris. And that's that part of the show we go to.
Thank you.
Go to brandenburgforgovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceded that's ever not conceded in the history of the United States. And I would love to have a discussion with the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, about that someday. And I think it'll be a fun discussion. So with that said, everybody, if you don't have a good example, be one. There's a lot of hurt going on. There's a lot of people out there that are tired. They're weary from the fight. They're weary from all of the things they see that are going wrong. And I get it. I get that way too. There are days I wake up and I got my fighting shoes on. I'm telling you what, because we're all sick of it. We're sick of this stuff that Whitmer, Nessel, Benson, and the whole cast of clowns that we got out there trying to subvert what God has created and what we were handed here on this earth to take care of as stewards of His.
Amen.
I would say to every one of our brothers and sisters out there in Christ, it's time to get serious, guys, and get off the sofa and get in the game and do something. You can't just stand here anymore. We've got to have the workers. Remember, it says in the Bible that the fields, the wheat fields are ripe for harvest, but there's not enough workers. It's time to start working, and know that every day that we're here, that God loves us. He's helping us. And all we have to do is just turn to Him every single day. So with that said, God bless you. God bless you all. God bless all those whom you love, and God bless America. Make it a great day. It's a choice. Boy Scouts handbook is greet everyone with a smile, no matter how you feel. Let's go ahead and stand and be strong and be a great force on this land, and turn this thing back around and make sure that God is in His rightful place, and that we are one nation under God. So stay on the line a minute, Chris, and I'm going to end the broadcast, and we will see you all tomorrow.